At my truck, the mechanic froze. His hands were trembling. He took me aside and said, "You must leave now. Don't go home." I asked, "What is going on?" He whispered, "Just look. You will understand in a second." What I saw under the car destroyed everything. My name is Victor Stone. I am 68 years old and I have spent 40 of those years building an empire out of diesel fumes, asphalt, and sleepless nights. I own Stone Logistics, a fleet of 50 18-wheelers that crisscross this country carrying everything from produce to steel. I built this life with my bare hands, starting as a driver who slept in his cab to save money on motels and eventually becoming the man who signs the checks. I thought I knew what danger looked like. I thought I knew the difference between a friend and a snake. I thought that after burying my wife 3 years ago, the hardest days of my life were behind me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for looking into the eyes of a man raising a toast to your health while he secretly holds the knife he used to sabotage your truck. I am a black man who fought his way up in a world that didn't want to give me an inch, and I didn't do it by being blind. But love, especially the love for a daughter, can act like a cataract, clouding your vision until it is almost too late. Before I tell you how I brought my own house down to kill the rats inside, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach a painful lesson to someone who mistook your kindness for weakness. It happened on Route 9 coming down the steep grade near the quarry. I was in my Ford F-150, the King Ranch edition I treated better than my own knees. The leather seats were still warm from the afternoon sun, and the radio was playing an old blues track I used to listen to with my wife. The grade was 7%, a long, winding snake of road that hugged the cliffside. I have driven this route 1,000 times in a fully loaded rig. I know every curve, every dip, every patch of asphalt that gets slick when it rains. I was doing 55, relaxing, thinking about the barbecue my son-in-law Blake had insisted on hosting that evening. He said he had big news. I figured he was going to ask for money again, or maybe, just maybe, tell me my daughter Kendra was pregnant. I tapped the brake pedal to scrub off some speed before the hairpin turn. Nothing happened. It wasn't a soft fade. It wasn't the shudder of worn pads. The pedal went straight to the floor like stepping into a bucket of water. No resistance, no grab. My stomach dropped faster than the speedometer rose. 60, 70. The heavy truck picked up momentum gravity, grabbing hold of 3 tons of steel and pulling it down the mountain. The engine roared, the RPMs redlining as the transmission fought against the weight. I pumped the pedal, once, twice, 3 times. Useless. It was limp dead under my boot. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of burning brake pads which I expected. It was the hot, metallic tang of pure fear, mixing with the scent of pine trees rushing by. The guardrail was coming up fast, a flimsy ribbon of galvanized steel standing between me and a 300-foot drop into the ravine. I didn't think about my late wife. I didn't see my life flash before my eyes. I didn't pray. I just saw the physics of death. I am a driver. Panic is a luxury I could not afford. I slammed the gear shifter down into second, forcing the transmission to scream in protest. The engine whined like a dying animal, the tachometer needle burying itself in the red. The truck lurched, the tires screeching like banshees as the rear end tried to overtake the front. I saw the gravel runoff ramp about 200 yards ahead. It was my only chance. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, fighting the momentum that wanted to fling me over the edge. The truck bucked, slammed into the deep gravel, and spun. Dust choked the air, turning the world brown and gray. Metal groaned as the side panel kissed the concrete barrier, sending a shower of sparks flying past my window. The truck shuddered violently, digging in, burying its axles in the stones until it finally mercifully came to a halt. Silence. For a moment there was just the ticking of the cooling engine and the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned gray. I sat there breathing in the dust, tasting the copper of adrenaline in my mouth. I was alive, but I knew trucks. I knew mechanics. I maintained this truck with the same obsession I applied to my fleet. Brakes do not just vanish on a vehicle that was inspected 2 weeks ago. I didn't call the police. I didn't call a tow truck from the insurance company. My gut was screaming at me that this wasn't an accident, and if it wasn't an accident, I couldn't trust the standard procedure. I called Manny. Manny has been fixing my rig since before I had gray hair. He is a man of few words, a genius with a wrench, and loyal to the bone. I told him to bring his flatbed and to come alone. 40 minutes later, we were in Manny's private garage, a converted barn miles away from the main depot. The air smelled of grease, old oil, and secrets. Manny put the truck up on the lift without saying a word. I sat on a greasy stool, my hands still shaking slightly, trying to light a cigar to calm my nerves. I watched him walk under the chassis with his flashlight. I expected him to tell me a line had rusted out or maybe a master cylinder seal had failed. 10 minutes later, Manny called me over. He wasn't wiping his hands on a rag like he usually does. He was standing perfectly still, looking up at the undercarriage. His face, usually impassive, was pale under the grime. "Come look at this, Vic," he said. His voice was different. Low. Scared. I walked under the lift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows. Manny pointed his flashlight beam at the rear axle, tracing the line of the hydraulic hose. The brake line wasn't worn. It wasn't rusted. It was severed, cleanly. There were 2 shiny pinch marks on the rubber hose where the metal had been exposed. It looked like a snake bite, but mechanical. "Someone used bolt cutters," Manny whispered. He looked at me, his eyes wide in the gloom of the garage. "This wasn't wear and tear, Vic. This was precise. Someone crawled under here. They didn't cut it all the way through. They pinched it enough to weaken it so the pressure would blow the line when you hit the brakes hard, like on a steep hill." I stared at the cut. It was a clean, deliberate act of violence. It was a signature. Whoever did this knew my schedule. They knew I was taking the mountain route today to check on a new distribution center. They knew I would be coming down that 7% grade, and they knew exactly how to make a murder look like a mechanical failure. "This is attempted murder," Vic Manny said, his voice trembling. "You need to call the cops. Now." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't the cold of the unheated garage. It was the cold realization of access. My truck is kept in a locked garage at my estate. The security code is known only to 3 people. Me, my daughter Kendra, and her husband Blake. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the silence. The sound was so loud in the quiet garage that Manny jumped. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a photo of my daughter and Blake on their wedding day. They looked so happy. I remembered paying for that wedding. I remembered shaking Blake's hand, welcoming him into the family, ignoring the little voice in my head that said his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I swiped answer. "Hey, Dad," Blake's voice chirped. It was cheerful, too cheerful. It was the voice of a man expecting to hear bad news delivered by a stranger. "You running late for dinner?" he asked. "The steaks are marinating and I opened that bottle of wine you like, the expensive one." I stared at the cut brake line while his voice filled my ear. He wasn't calling to ask if I was late. He was calling to see if I was dead. He expected a police officer or a paramedic to answer the phone. He expected to hear that the great Victor Stone had lost control and plunged into the ravine. He was fishing for confirmation of his inheritance. I took a breath, forcing my voice to be steady, masking the rage that wanted to scream down the line. I had to become an actor in that split second. I had to become the prey, so I could eventually become the hunter. "I had a little car trouble, Blake," I said. My voice sounded weary old. "Just a flat tire. I had to wait for a tow." There was a pause. A beat of silence too long to be natural. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the disappointment washing over him. "Oh," Blake said. His tone dropped just a fraction. "Just a flat. That is great news, Dad. We were worried sick when you didn't show up. We thought something terrible happened." "You have no idea," I thought. "I will be there soon," I said. "Keep the wine open. I need a drink." I hung up. I looked at Manny. His eyes were asking me 1,000 questions. "Fix it," I told him. "Replace the line. Keep the old one as evidence. Put it in a safe. And get me the loaner car, the old beat-up Chevy you use for parts runs." "You are going home?" Manny asked, grabbing my arm. "Vic, that man just tried to kill you. You can't go back there." I looked at my loyal mechanic, then looked back at my truck. "I am not going home to eat dinner, Manny," I said, buttoning my jacket over the dust and grime. "I am going home to look the devil in the eye. If I don't go back, he will know he failed. He will run, or he will try again. I need him to think he is safe. I need him to think I am just a lucky, senile old man who dodged a bullet he didn't even see coming." Manny handed me the keys to the loaner. "Be careful, Vic," he said. "Careful is for people who have something to lose," I said. "I almost lost my life an hour ago. Now I am playing with house money. I drove out of the garage and into the night, heading toward the house I built, toward the daughter I adored, and toward the son-in-law who had just signed his own death warrant, though he didn't know it yet. The game had begun, and unlike Blake, I wasn't playing for money. I was playing for justice. The taxi dropped me off at the bottom of the driveway because I did not want them to hear an engine approach. I wanted to be a ghost. I walked up the long paved path to the colonial house I had paid for in cash 10 years ago. Through the large bay windows, the warm glow of the chandelier spilled out onto the lawn. It looked like a picture-perfect American dream. Inside, my family was preparing for a barbecue to celebrate a future that did not include me. I stopped at the door and took a deep breath. My hands were still stained with the grease from under the truck, a stark contrast to the polished mahogany door. I turned the handle. It was unlocked. I stepped into the foyer. The smell of grilled steak and expensive perfume filled the air. Laughter drifted from the living room. It was Blake. He was laughing a loud, boisterous laugh that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. I walked silently across the plush carpet until I stood in the archway of the living room. Blake was standing by the fireplace. In his hand, he held a crystal glass filled with a deep red liquid. On the mantel behind him sat the bottle. My heart hammered against my ribs harder than it had when the brakes failed. It was a 1995 Chateau Margaux. I had bought that bottle 20 years ago in Paris. It was the wine my late wife and I had agreed to drink on our 40th anniversary. She died before we could open it. I had saved it, dusting it off every week, waiting for a moment worthy of her memory. Blake had opened it for a Tuesday night barbecue. He raised the glass to his lips, closing his eyes as if savoring the victory. Then he opened them and saw me. The glass slipped. It didn't shatter, but wine sloshed over the rim, staining his expensive beige carpet like a splatter of fresh blood. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax statue. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For 3 seconds I saw the truth. I saw the disappointment. I saw the terror of a man who realizes the ghost he created has walked back into the room. "Victor," he stammered. His voice cracked. "You are here." I stared at him, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. I looked at the wine glass. I looked at the bottle on the mantel. Then I looked him dead in the eye. "I had a little trouble with the truck," I said, my voice low and gravelly. "But I am hard to kill, Blake. You should know that by now." Kendra came running in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Dad!" she shrieked. She threw her arms around me. I hugged her back, but my body felt stiff. I could smell the wine on her breath, too. She had helped him drink her mother's memory. "We were so worried," Kendra said, pulling back. "Blake said you called and had a flat tire. We were about to come get you." I looked over her shoulder at Blake. He had recovered his composure. The mask was back in place. He set the glass down and forced a smile that showed too many teeth. "Yes," Blake said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "I am just glad you are safe, Vic. I was just pouring a drink to calm my nerves. I was so stressed waiting for you." He was lying. He was drinking to celebrate my death. I took his hand. His palm was cold and clammy. I squeezed it just a little too hard, feeling his knuckles grind together. "I bet you were," I said. "I bet you were very stressed." "Come sit down, Dad," Kendra said, pulling me toward the dining room. "You look exhausted. You are covered in dirt. What happened?" "Just a long day under the hood," I said. "Nothing a hot meal cannot fix." We sat at the long dining table. The steak Blake had grilled was rare, swimming in red juice. I cut into it, watching the red liquid pool on the white china. It reminded me of the brake fluid leaking onto the garage floor. I took a bite. It tasted like ash. So Vic Blake started pouring more of my wife's wine into my glass without asking. "This little scare with the truck got me thinking. You really shouldn't be driving those heavy rigs anymore. It is dangerous. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be." I chewed slowly, staring at him. My reflexes saved my life today, I thought. "I am fine, Blake," I said. "I can drive circles around men half my age." Kendra chimed in, her voice trembling slightly. "But Dad, Blake is right. You are 68. You have worked hard your whole life. Maybe it is time to step back. Let someone else handle the logistics." I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were pleading, but they were also vacant. She was reciting a script he had written for her. "We actually have some paperwork prepared," Blake said, reaching under the table and pulling out a leather folder. He placed it next to my steak. "It is just a standard power of attorney. It would give me the authority to manage the day-to-day operations of Stone Logistics, just so you do not have to worry about the stress. You can relax, go play golf, travel. I looked into the document. It wasn't just day-to-day operations. I could see the bold text even from here. It gave him full control over assets, bank accounts, and property. He wasn't asking to help. He was asking for the keys to the kingdom he had just tried to steal by murder. I am not signing anything tonight, I said, pushing the folder away. Blake's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Vic, be reasonable. We are just trying to protect you. What if something happened to you today? The company would be frozen. We would be helpless. The desperation in his voice was rising. He needed this signature. The brake line sabotage had failed, so now he was trying the direct approach. I said no. I slammed my fork down. The sound echoed in the room. Kendra jumped. Blake froze. I rubbed my temples, feigning a sudden wave of dizziness. I let my eyelids droop. I let my shoulders slump. I needed to play the part he wanted to see. I needed to be the frail, confused old man. I am sorry, I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. My head, it is spinning. I think the stress of the flat tire got to me. I cannot think straight. Blake's face softened instantly. He saw an opening. Of course, Vic. Of course. You are tired. You are confused. We can handle this tomorrow. Why don't you go upstairs and rest? Yes, Kendra said, standing up to help me. Come on, Dad. Let me help you to bed. I leaned heavily on her as we walked up the stairs. I felt her trembling. Whether it was fear of me or fear of him, I did not know. I hoped it was the latter. I can manage from here, baby girl, I said at my bedroom door. I just need sleep. I went into my room and locked the door. I waited 5 minutes listening. I heard their footsteps go back down to the kitchen. I heard the clinking of dishes. Then I moved. I was not tired. I was not dizzy. I was a man on a mission. I opened my closet and pulled out my old gear bag. Inside was a small high-definition dash camera I used for driver training. It was battery-operated and motion-activated. I slipped off my shoes and opened the bedroom door. The house was quiet. I crept down the hallway to my home office. This was the room where I kept my safe, my ledgers, and my life's work. It was also the room Blake used when he pretended to work on his failing real estate deals. I entered the office. The moonlight filtered through the blinds. I placed the camera on the bookshelf nestled between a stack of trucking encyclopedias and a model of a Peterbilt truck. The lens was pointed directly at the mahogany desk. It was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I turned it on and slipped back out. I went back to my room, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. I did not sleep. I waited. 2 hours later, I heard the heavy footsteps on the stairs. They did not stop at the bedroom. They went down the hall to the office. The door creaked open. I grabbed my phone and opened the app connected to the camera. The video feed flickered to life in the darkness of my room. Blake was pacing the office. He looked like a caged animal. He had a glass of whiskey in one hand and his phone in the other. He took a swig, then dialed a number. He put the phone on speaker and set it on the desk right in front of my hidden camera. I turned the volume up on my phone, holding it to my ear. What happened? A rough voice growled from the speaker. He is alive, Blake hissed. He slammed his hand on the desk. The old bastard is alive. He walked in here like nothing happened, said he had a flat tire. There was a silence on the other end. Then the voice spoke again, colder this time. That was not the deal, Blake. We cut the line exactly like you said. He should have gone over the cliff. I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. It felt like a physical blow to the chest. My son-in-law had drawn a map for my murder. He must have geared down, Blake said, running a hand through his hair. He is an old trucker. He knows how to handle a skid. Look, it does not matter. He is shaken up. He is old. He is confused. I tried to get him to sign the papers tonight, but he got stubborn. You are running out of time, Blake, the voice said. The interest payment is due on Friday. If we do not have the $2 million, we take the house. And maybe we take a few fingers just to teach you a lesson. I have it under control, Blake shouted, his voice cracking with panic. He trusts me. He is going to sign. I will get him to sign the power of attorney tomorrow. I will say it is for insurance or something. Once I have that signature, I will liquidate the fleet. I will sell the trucks. You will get your money. Liquidate the fleet. He was going to sell my life's work for scrap to pay off a gambling debt. Just make sure he doesn't wake up tomorrow with a sudden burst of clarity, the voice warned. Maybe you should help him sleep. Permanently. I watched Blake on the small screen. He picked up the bottle of whiskey and stared at it. "Don't worry," Blake whispered. "I am already increasing his dosage. He won't know what hit him." He hung up the phone. I watched him chug the rest of the whiskey, his face twisted in a mask of greed and fear. I stopped the recording. I saved the file to the cloud. I had him. I had the confession. I had the motive. I could call the police right now and have him dragged out in handcuffs. But as I lay there in the dark, I realized that was too easy. Prison was too good for him. He wanted to play games with my life. He wanted to destroy my legacy. He wanted to manipulate my daughter. I wasn't just going to send him to jail. I was going to break him. I was going to let him think he was winning until the very last second. I was going to let him walk into his own trap. I rolled over and closed my eyes. Tomorrow I would wake up and play the role of the senile, helpless old man. I would be the victim he wanted me to be. But behind the scenes, Victor Stone was going to war. The next morning I told Blake I was going for a walk to clear my head. He watched me leave from the kitchen window like a hawk watching a field mouse. I walked 3 blocks to the corner store and called a cab from a burner phone I had bought with cash. I was not taking chances with GPS tracking or Uber history. I directed the driver to a small diner on the south side of the city, a place with cracked vinyl seats and coffee that tasted like battery acid. It was the kind of place where men like me did business when we did not want to be seen. Sitting in the back booth was Wallace. We had served in the same platoon 40 years ago. He was a private investigator now, the kind who found things that did not want to be found. He did not smile when I sat down. He just slid a thick manila envelope across the sticky table. I opened it. Inside were bank statements, betting slips and screenshots from a dark web forum. The numbers made my blood run cold. $2 million. That was the hole Blake had dug for himself. He had leveraged everything. He had maxed out credit cards in my daughter's name. He had taken out high-interest loans from shadow lenders. And he had lost it all on cryptocurrency scams and underground sports betting. Wallace pointed a calloused finger at a highlighted date on the top page. "Next Friday," he said in a low voice. "That is the deadline, Vic. He owes this money to a syndicate out of Chicago. They are not the kind of people who send overdue notices. They send men with baseball bats and bone saws. If he does not pay by next Friday, they are going to kill him." I stared at the date. Next Friday. That explained the urgency. That explained why the brake line was cut yesterday. Blake was not just greedy, he was desperate. He was a drowning man trying to use my dead body as a life raft. The plan was simple and terrified me with its cold logic. I die in a tragic accident. Kendra inherits the company immediately. Blake, having power of attorney over her finances, which I knew he likely coerced her into signing, sells the fleet for quick cash. He pays off the mob and he walks away clean with my legacy in his pocket. I looked at Wallace. "Does Kendra know I asked?" Wallace shook his head. "I don't think she knows the extent of it, but she knows something is wrong. He is terrified, Vic. And a terrified man is a dangerous man." I paid Wallace and left the diner. The walk back to the cab felt different. The city noise faded into the background. All I could hear was the ticking clock in my head. I had 7 days. 7 days before the loan sharks came for him. 7 days before he tried to kill me again. I returned to the house earlier than I planned. The house was quiet. Blake's car was gone, likely out meeting his creditors or setting up his next trap. I walked up the stairs, my steps silent on the carpet. The door to the master bathroom was slightly ajar. I heard a soft sniffle. It was the sound of a woman trying to cry without making a noise. I pushed the door open gently. Kendra was standing in front of the vanity mirror. She was wearing a long-sleeve blouse even though it was 80 degrees outside. She was dabbing thick beige concealer onto her left wrist. When she saw me in the mirror, she jumped, dropping the makeup bottle into the sink. "Dad," she gasped, pulling her sleeve down quickly. "You scared me. I thought you were Blake." I did not say a word. I walked over to her. My heart was breaking, but my face was stone. I reached out and took her left hand. She tried to pull away, wincing. "Let me see," I said softly. It was not a request. She hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. Slowly, she pulled back the silk sleeve. The bruise was ugly. It was a dark purple ring around her delicate wrist, the distinct shape of 4 fingers and a thumb. It was the mark of someone grabbing her, twisting her, forcing her to submit. I stared at the mark on my daughter's skin. The rage that filled me was different from the anger I felt about the truck. The truck was machinery. This was my flesh and blood. This was the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. I wanted to find Blake and beat him until my hands broke. I wanted to end him right now. "What happened, Kendra?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed violence. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I just fell," she whispered. The lie came out automatically rehearsed. I tripped over the rug and hit my arm on the door frame. "It is nothing, Dad. Really. I am just clumsy." She was protecting him, even now. Or maybe she was just too scared to tell the truth. She was trapped in a cycle of abuse that I had been too blind to see. I had been so busy running the company, so busy grieving my wife, that I had missed the monster growing in my own home. I let go of her hand gently. I brushed a tear from her cheek with my thumb. "Be careful, baby girl," I said. "You have to be more careful." I could not confront him yet. If I confronted him about the abuse now, he would deny it. He would gaslight her. He might even hurt her worse to keep her quiet. Or he would panic and accelerate his plans to kill me. To save her, I had to play the long game. I had to get him out of our lives permanently. I had to put him in a cage where he could never touch her again. I walked out of the bathroom and went straight to the garage. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to put my fist through the drywall. I needed to focus. I needed to channel this hate into a weapon. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed Manny again. "I need a car, Manny," I said when he answered. "Not the Chevy. I need something fast, something invisible. And I need you to clean out the safe at the main office." "What are you planning?" Vic Manny asked. He could hear the darkness in my voice. "I am planning a funeral," I said, "but not mine." I paced the length of the garage, looking at the empty spot where my Ford F-150 used to sit. Blake thought he was the predator. He thought he was the smart one, the modern businessman dealing with a dinosaur. He thought he could cut a brake line, bruise my daughter, and steal my empire because I was just an old man who moved crates from point A to point B. He forgot what I was before I was a CEO. He forgot that I grew up on streets where you had to have eyes in the back of your head. He forgot that I served in a unit that specialized in demolition. "I am not just going to catch him," I whispered to the empty garage. "I am going to let him think he has won. I am going to let him climb all the way to the top of the mountain. I am going to let him see the promised land, and then when he reaches for it, I am going to cut the ground out from under him. I will not just make him pay the money he owes. I will make him pay for every tear my daughter shed. I will make him pay for every drop of fear I felt on that mountain road." I looked at the security camera in the corner of the garage, the one Blake had installed to monitor the driveway. I stared directly into the lens, knowing he might be watching the feed on his phone right now. I let my face go slack. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I reshaped my posture into the slump of a defeated, confused old man. If he wanted a victim, I would give him the best performance of my life. But while he was watching the show, I would be dismantling his life brick by brick until the roof caved in on his head. The brake line was just the beginning. The real crash was coming, and Blake was the one behind the wheel without a seatbelt. The hardest part of war is not pulling the trigger, but waiting in the trench while the enemy walks right over your head. I had to become an actor in my own home. I had to dismantle the man I spent 68 years building and replace him with a confused shell. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of payroll checks that needed my signature. This used to be a ritual. I loved the feeling of paying the men and women who kept Stone Logistics moving. But today my hand hovered over the paper holding the expensive fountain pen Blake had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. Blake was sitting across from me pretending to read the Wall Street Journal, but I could feel his eyes burning holes in my forehead. He was waiting for a slip. He was waiting for a sign that the stress of the accident had cracked my foundation. I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. I let my hand tremble. It started as a small quiver in my thumb and spread to my wrist until the pen tip danced erratically over the signature line. I squeezed my eyes shut and let out a frustrated sigh, dropping the pen onto the mahogany table. "What is wrong?" Vic Blake asked, instantly lowering the paper. His voice was laced with that fake concern that made my stomach turn. I rubbed my temples, massaging the skin as if trying to push a headache back inside my skull. I looked up at him, keeping my eyes slightly out of focus. "I cannot remember the date," I whispered. "I know it is Tuesday, but the number is gone. It is just a blank space in my head." Blake smiled. It was a micro-expression there and gone in a flash, but I caught it. "It is the 12th Vic," he said softly. "Here, let me help you." He reached over and guided my hand. I let him touch me. I let him feel the fake tremor in my muscles. I signed the check, but instead of my usual sharp, authoritative V, Stone, I scrawled a shaky mess that looked like a child's drawing. I stopped halfway through the surname and looked up at the ceiling. "Did I call Jenkins yet?" I asked, referring to my fleet manager. Blake frowned. "Vic Jenkins retired 3 years ago. Remember? We threw him that big party at the warehouse." I blinked rapidly, feigning shock. Right. I knew that. I paused, letting my lower lip tremble. I thought I saw him yesterday. I looked down at the check. I had signed it Victor Stone, with a T instead of just Stone. I stared at the misspelling, letting horror wash over my face. I misspelled my own name. I gasped, pushing the checkbook away. "What is happening to me, Blake?" Blake stood up and walked around the table. He put a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy like a yoke. "You went through a terrible trauma yesterday, Vic. The doctor said shock can manifest in strange ways. You just need rest. You need to let someone else handle the details for a while." I slumped in the chair, making myself look smaller. "Maybe you are right," I mumbled. "Maybe I am losing my grip." The satisfaction radiating off him was palpable. He thought the brake line failure had shaken my brain loose. He did not know that Jenkins had called me 10 minutes ago to report a delivery. I knew exactly what day it was. I knew exactly who I was. But I had to let Blake believe he was winning, so he would get careless. That afternoon, a black sedan pulled up the driveway. I was sitting in the living room staring blankly at a television that was turned off when Blake walked in with a stranger. The man was young, too young to be a specialist, wearing a suit that cost more than his car and smelling of peppermint and ambition. "Vic, this is Dr. Evans," Blake said, ushering the man in. "He is a friend from the club. He specializes in geriatric trauma and neurology. I asked him to stop by and just give you a quick look over, since you would not go to the hospital yesterday." I looked at Dr. Evans. He did not have the weary, patient eyes of a real doctor. He had the shifting, hungry eyes of a man looking for a payout. He opened a sleek leather bag and took out a stethoscope and a light. "Mr. Stone." "Nice to meet you," Evans said. His handshake was weak. "Blake tells me you have been experiencing some confusion, some memory lapses, tremors." I nodded slowly, not making eye contact. "I forgot my own name this morning," I whispered. Evans went through the motions of an exam. He shone a light in my eyes, tapped my knees, listened to my heart. It was theater. A real neurologist would have ordered an MRI. A real doctor would have asked about my history. Evans just hummed and hawed, exchanging knowing glances with Blake. After 10 minutes, he sat back and sighed, putting on a serious face. "Well, Mr. Stone, it appears you are suffering from acute post-traumatic stress, which is exacerbating some underlying cognitive decline. It is not uncommon at your age. The accident triggered a rapid onset of dementia symptoms." "Dementia," I repeated, letting my voice crack. "It is manageable," Evans said quickly, pulling a prescription pad from his pocket. "But we need to be aggressive. You need to sleep. You need to calm your nervous system down so your brain can heal. If you don't, this confusion could become permanent very quickly." He scribbled something and handed the slip to Blake. Not me. "I have some samples in my bag to get you started," Evans said, producing a plastic bottle with no label. "These are high-strength sedatives. They will help with the anxiety and the tremors. Take 2 every 4 hours. Blake took the bottle like it was gold. "Thank you, doctor. I will make sure he takes them." I watched the transaction. No pharmacy, no paper trail, just a bottle of pills from a bag. I knew what this was. They were not trying to heal me. They were trying to sedate me into a vegetable state so I would be compliant when they put the power of attorney in front of me again. Or worse, they were trying to stop my heart and call it natural causes. When Evans left, Blake went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of water and 2 of the white pills. "Here, Vic," Blake said, his voice soothing. "Doctor's orders. This will make you feel better." I took the pills in my trembling hand. I looked at them. They looked innocent enough, just compressed powder. But to me they looked like bullets. "I will take them upstairs," I said. "I want to lie down." Blake hesitated. He wanted to watch me swallow them. "I am just going to the bathroom first." "Blake," I snapped, letting a flash of old Victor show through before dampening it again. "I can take a pill by myself." "Fine," Blake said, backing off. "Just take them. I will come check on you in an hour." I walked up the stairs, clutching the pills. My heart was pounding. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I went straight to the window where a large potted ficus plant stood. It was a hardy plant. I had had it for 5 years. It had survived neglect drafts and overwatering. I looked at the pills in my hand. I crushed them between my thumb and forefinger. They crumbled easily. I dropped the powder into the soil at the base of the plant. Then I took the glass of water Blake had given me and poured it over the powder, washing it down into the roots. "I am sorry," I whispered to the plant. "Better you than me." I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. I had to wait. I had to pretend to be asleep when he came back. An hour later, the doorknob turned. I kept my breathing shallow and even. Blake walked in softly. He stood over the bed. I could feel his presence. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "He is out," Blake whispered to himself. He stayed for a moment longer, probably checking to see if my chest was rising. Then he left, closing the door softly. I lay there for a long time, listening to the house settle. I thought about the man who had just stood over me. He had fed me poison and then tucked me in. The betrayal was so deep it felt like a physical wound. I slept fitfully with one eye open, a knife under my pillow. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. I sat up and looked at the ficus plant. My stomach turned over. The plant was dead. Yesterday, its leaves had been a vibrant, glossy green. Today, they were limp, yellow, and brown, curling in on themselves as if they had been scorched by fire. The stems were drooping. The life had been sucked out of it in less than 12 hours. I got out of bed and walked over to it. I touched a leaf. It crumbled in my hand like ash. If I had taken those pills, that would be my brain. That would be my liver. That would be my heart. Evans had not given me a sedative. He had given me a toxin. Maybe it was a massive dose of beta blockers. Maybe it was arsenic. Maybe it was something experimental. It didn't matter what the chemical was. The intent was clear. They were not trying to control me anymore. They were trying to erase me. I heard footsteps in the hall. Blake was coming to see if the medicine had worked. I grabbed the plant. I could not hide a 5-foot tree. I had to think fast. I dragged it into the corner behind the heavy velvet curtains hiding the carnage. I jumped back into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. I let my mouth hang open. I stared blankly at the wall. The door opened. Blake walked in, looking cheerful. "Good morning, Vic," he said. "How did you sleep?" I turned my head slowly. I looked at him with dead eyes. "Who are you?" I rasped. Blake's smile widened. It was the smile of a man who had just won the lottery. "It is me, Vic." "Blake, your son-in-law." "I don't know you," I mumbled, rolling over and facing the wall. "Excellent," Blake whispered. He left the room whistling. He thought the poison had worked. He thought my brain was fried. He did not know that behind the curtain, the dead plant was the only evidence I needed to put him away for life. And he did not know that the man in the bed was more awake than he had ever been. I waited until I heard him go downstairs. I got up and looked at the dead plant again. I took a photo of it with my burner phone. Then I took a sample of the soil, scraping the white residue into a small plastic bag I found in my travel kit. This soil is going to the lab, I thought. The game had changed. This was no longer about money or a company. This was about survival. I was living in a house with a murderer who smiled and called me Dad. I dressed quickly. I needed to get out. I needed to meet Manny. I needed to get this soil sample to a chemist I knew from the old days. But first I had to walk past Blake. I had to shuffle. I had to look at him with empty eyes and ask him where the bathroom was in my own house. I walked down the stairs, gripping the banister like my life depended on it. Because it did. Blake was in the kitchen on the phone. Yeah, he took the double dose, he was saying. He is completely gone. He does not even know who I am. Bring the papers over at noon. We will get his thumbprint if he cannot sign. He saw me and hung up quickly. "Hey, Vic," he said, his voice sticky sweet. "Hungry for breakfast." I looked at the coffee pot. I looked at the eggs he was cooking. I knew I could never eat or drink anything in this house again. "I am not hungry," I said, staring at the floor. "I want to go to the park. I used to go to the park." "Sure," Vic Blake said. "Go for a walk. Just stay close. We have a big meeting at noon." I walked out the front door. The sun hit my face, but I felt cold. I walked down the driveway past the spot where my truck should have been. "I am coming for you, Blake," I thought as I reached the street. "And I am bringing hell with me." The afternoon sun was filtering through the blinds of the home office, but it offered no warmth. The room felt like an interrogation cell. I sat in the leather chair that used to be my command center, but now felt like a witness stand. Blake stood over me. He was vibrating with an energy that was half panic and half aggression. He placed a thick stack of papers on the desk in front of me. The sound of the heavy bond paper hitting the wood was loud in the quiet room. "We need to get this done today," Vic Blake said. His voice was tight. "I spoke to the accountants. The IRS is breathing down our necks about the estate taxes for next quarter. If we do not file these extensions by 5 o'clock, we are going to get hit with a massive penalty." I looked at the stack. It was intimidating. Dozens of pages filled with dense legal jargon and small print. He had flagged several pages with yellow sticky notes where my signature was required. "Just sign where the stickers are," Blake said, uncapping a pen and shoving it into my hand. "We do not have time to read every clause. It is standard boilerplate stuff. I already reviewed it." I took the pen. My hand was shaking partly because I was keeping up the act of the frail old man and partly because I wanted to stab him with it. I looked at the first page. It was indeed a tax extension form, standard stuff. I signed it, letting my signature trail off into a shaky scrawl. Blake flipped the page quickly. And here he said, I signed again. He flipped again. He was moving too fast. He was trying to create a rhythm. Sign, flip, flip. He wanted me to go into autopilot. He wanted me to trust him. And this one is just an update for the corporate filing, he said, turning to a document that looked slightly different. I lowered the pen, but I did not sign. I blinked, leaning in closer, squinting as if I was having trouble focusing. I was reading fast. My eyes, which had scanned thousands of bills of lading and contracts over 40 years, picked out the keywords instantly. This was not a tax form. It was a change of beneficiary form for my MetLife insurance policy, the policy that was worth $5 million. Currently, the beneficiary was the trust I had set up for Kendra. This document would change the primary beneficiary to Blake Anderson and Kendra Stone Anderson as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. If I signed this, I was worth more dead than alive. If I signed this, the brake line incident would look like a practice run. He was not just trying to steal the company. He was trying to cash out the insurance policy after he killed me. I looked up at him. He was watching the tip of the pen like a starving dog watching a piece of meat fall from a table. "What is this one?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The font is so small, Blake. I cannot read it. It is just a formality." "Vic," he said, his patience snapping. "It just updates the address for the insurance carrier so the bills go to the office instead of the house. Just sign it. We are running out of time." He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. It was not a comfort. It was a threat. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could not sign this, but I could not refuse to sign it without dropping my cover. If I said I knew what it was, he would know I was lucid. He would know I was onto him. And a desperate man with a $2 million debt might just decide to skip the insurance fraud and kill me right here in the office. I needed an accident. I needed a distraction. I reached for the mug of coffee that sat on the corner of the desk. It was steaming hot. Blake had brought it to me 10 minutes ago, black, no sugar, just the way I liked it. Or just the way he hoped would mask the taste of whatever poison he might be using next. "I am so thirsty," I mumbled. My throat is dry. I lifted the mug with my right hand. I let the tremors start. The ceramic rattled against my wedding ring. I brought it halfway to my lips and then I let my wrist spasm. It was a calculated move, a controlled chaos. I jerked my hand to the left. The mug tipped. "Oh no," I cried out. The hot black liquid surged over the rim. It did not go onto the floor. It did not go onto my lap. It went exactly where I intended it to go. The dark stain spread across the documents instantly. It hit the insurance form dead center. The hot coffee soaked into the expensive paper, turning it into a brown, soggy mess. The ink began to run. The line where I was supposed to sign my death warrant disappeared under a pool of Colombian roast. I dropped the mug. It bounced on the desk and rolled onto the floor, shattering. Blake roared. "You stupid old man!" he screamed. He grabbed the papers, trying to shake the liquid off, but it was too late. The beneficiary form was ruined. It was tearing in his hands as he tried to lift it. "Look what you did!" Blake yelled. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered ugliness. He threw the soggy papers back onto the desk. "Do you have any idea how much trouble this causes? Do you know how hard it is to get these forms processed?" He was losing it. The mask of the caring son-in-law had completely disintegrated. He was just a thug who had lost his winning lottery ticket. I shrank back in the chair, pulling my knees up, holding my hands up as if to ward off a blow. "I am sorry," I whimpered. "My hand. It just slipped. I didn't mean to." "Shut up," Blake hissed. "Just shut up. You are useless. You are a useless, broken old man." He paced around the room, running his hands through his hair. He kicked the broken pieces of the mug across the floor. He was panicking. The deadline for his debt was Friday. Today was Wednesday. He needed that signature today so he could fax it before the close of business. Now he would have to request a new original form, wait for it to be mailed, or rush a courier and try again. He had lost precious time. "I have to clean this up," Blake muttered more to himself than to me. "I have to print new copies. God, why can't you just die already?" He stopped. He realized what he had said. He looked at me, his eyes wide. I stared back, my mouth open in fake confusion. "What did you say, Blake?" "Nothing," he snapped. I said, "Why can't you just try to be steady? Stay here. Don't move. I have to go to the printer in the guest house. Don't touch anything else." He stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the framed pictures on the wall rattled. As soon as his footsteps faded down the hall, I dropped the act. I stood up, moving silently and swiftly. I stepped over the coffee puddle and went to the door, locking it. Then I went into the adjoining bathroom and turned on the faucet full blast. If he came back, he would think I was washing up. I pulled the burner phone from my sock. My hands were steady now. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Abernathy. A deep, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "It is Vic," I said, keeping my voice low. "We have a problem. He just tried to get me to sign over the life insurance." I heard the lawyer inhale sharply. "The $2 million policy." "5. I corrected him. "He is getting desperate, Marcus. He is drowning, and he is trying to stand on my head to breathe. I bought us some time with a spilled cup of coffee, but he is going to come back with new papers tomorrow. I cannot hold him off forever with clumsy accidents." "We need to go to the police," Vic Abernathy said. "This is enough." "Not yet," I said. "If we go to the police now, it is his word against a senile old man. He will say I am confused. He will say it was just tax papers and I misunderstood. He has Dr. Evans ready to testify that I am losing my mind. We need something concrete. We need to catch him in the act of theft, not just attempted fraud." "So what do you want to do?" Abernathy asked. "I want to bait the trap," I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. "I want you to draft a will. A new will." "A new will," Abernathy repeated. "Yes." "I want you to draft a will that leaves everything to Kendra but places it in a blind trust managed by a third party until she is 40. But here is the kicker. I want you to add a codicil, a specific clause about a secret account." "The Swiss account you lied about?" Abernathy asked. "Exactly. I want a document that looks official. I want it to say that there is an offshore account containing $5 million in liquid cash, accessible only by a bearer bond key, that is currently in my safety deposit box at the downtown bank." "You are sending him on a treasure hunt," Abernathy said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I am sending him to hell," I said. "I want him to believe that the only way to get that money is to get me to that bank. I want him to believe that if he kills me before we get to the bank, the money disappears forever. It is the only way to keep me alive until Friday." "Friday?" Abernathy asked. "What happens on Friday?" "Friday is when his loan sharks come to collect," I said. "And Friday is when I am going to introduce him to the real Victor Stone. Draft it Marcus. Make it look real. Put the wax seal on it. Bring it over tomorrow morning. Tell him you are here to update my estate planning because of my health scare. He will let you in. He will think he can bully me into signing that insurance form while you are there, or he will think he can manipulate the will. But when he sees the clause about the cash, he will forget about the insurance. Greed is a powerful blinder," I said. "I will have it ready by 9 a.m., Abernathy said. "Watch your back, Vic." I hung up and turned off the water. I unlocked the bathroom door and sat back down in the leather chair. I looked at the ruined papers on the desk. Blake wanted a signature. I was going to give him one. But it would not be on an insurance form. It would be on a document that would lead him straight into the arms of the police and straight into the ruin he deserved. I waited for the doorknob to turn. I waited for the monster to come back. And for the first time in days, I was not afraid. I was ready. The next morning, the tension in the kitchen was thick enough to choke on. Blake was pacing by the coffee machine, his movements jerky and aggressive. He was still furious about the ruined insurance papers from yesterday. He looked like a man who had not slept, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. I sat at the table, staring at a plate of scrambled eggs that I had no intention of eating. I was playing with my food, pushing the yellow mounds around with a fork, letting my head bob slightly as if I was struggling to stay awake. I knew I had to escalate the game. The coffee accident bought me 24 hours, but Blake was desperate. Desperate men do not wait. They act. I needed to give him a reason to keep me alive until Friday. I needed to dangle a carrot so big that he would forget about the stick. I cleared my throat, a dry, rattling sound. I started talking to myself, muttering loud enough for him to hear, but soft enough to sound like the ramblings of a decaying mind. I wonder if the key still fits, I mumbled. It has been so long. 1985. That was a good year for hauling steel. Blake stopped pacing. He did not turn around immediately, but his shoulders stiffened. He was listening. I took a sip of orange juice and continued staring past the table into the middle distance. $5 million. It is a lot of cash to just leave sitting in a box. But Zurich is so far away. I don't think I can travel that far anymore. Blake spun around. The aggression vanished from his face, replaced instantly by a look of predatory curiosity. He walked over to the table, moving slowly like a hunter approaching a spooked deer. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down, leaning forward. "What did you say, Vic?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. "What about Zurich?" I blinked, looking at him as if I was surprised he was there. "Zurich," I repeated, looking confused. "Did I say Zurich? I meant the safety deposit box, the one with the bearer bonds. I hid them from the IRS back in the 80s. You know how it was. Cash business." I leaned in closer, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. 5 million, Blake. In untraceable bonds. I put the key in the downtown vault. I was saving it for a rainy day. I saw the change happen in real time. It was physical. His pupils dilated. His breathing hitched. The anger that had been radiating off him evaporated, replaced by the sheer blinding light of greed. $5 million. It was more than double what he owed the loan sharks. It was his salvation. It was his ticket to freedom. And suddenly I was not a useless old man anymore. I was a treasure chest. 5 million, Blake whispered, licking his dry lips. And it is in the downtown vault. You have the key. I nodded slowly. Yes. But I cannot remember the code to get into the main lobby. My head is so fuzzy lately. I need to go there. I need to check if it is still safe. Blake reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm was sweating. Do not worry, Vic, he said, his voice dripping with synthetic sweetness. I can help you. We can go together. I will drive you. We can get that money and put it somewhere safe. You do not want the IRS finding it now, do you? I pulled my hand back, feigning fear. No IRS. They will take it all. Exactly, Blake said, nodding vigorously. We have to protect it. We should go get it. Today. I shook my head, rubbing my eyes. Not today. I am too tired. The doctor said I need rest. My head hurts, Blake. Maybe next week. Panic flickered in his eyes. He could not wait until next week. His deadline was Friday. No, Vic, he said, an edge creeping back into his voice before he suppressed it. We should go soon, before you forget where the key is. How about Friday? Friday is a good day. I paused, pretending to consider it. I looked at the calendar on the wall, then back at him. Friday, I mumbled. Yes, Friday might be okay, if I feel better. Blake sat back, exhaling a long breath. He looked like he had just run a marathon. He had a date, he had a target, and most importantly, he had a reason not to poison my oatmeal this morning. I stood up, leaving the eggs untouched. I am going to the garden, I said. I need fresh air. As I walked out, I felt his eyes on my back. He was already spending the money in his head. He was already planning how to get the bonds, cash them, and then dispose of the only witness. The reprieve did not last long. An hour later, I was sitting on the bench in the rose garden, the place where I used to sit with my wife. I was watching a bumblebee work its way into a flower, thinking about how nature was cruel but honest. A predator in the wild did not smile at you before it ate you. The back door opened and Kendra walked out. She was not alone. The shadow of Blake hung in the doorway behind her, watching. She walked toward me with her head down, her arms wrapped around herself as if she was cold. When she got closer, I saw that her eyes were red and swollen. She had been crying. Not the soft, silent tears from the bathroom, but the jagged, heaving sobs of someone who had been broken down. She sat next to me on the bench. She did not hug me. She stared at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "we need to talk." I looked at her, my beautiful, smart, strong daughter, reduced to a mouthpiece for a coward. "What is it, baby girl?" I asked softly. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Blake told me about the account, the one in Zurich." I nodded. "I mentioned it this morning. I forgot I was not supposed to talk about it." Dad, Kendra said, turning to look at me. Her eyes were pleading. "We really need you to go to the bank on Friday. It is important." Why, I asked, playing the innocent. "Do you need money?" I thought the trucking company was doing well. I thought Blake was a successful investor. Kendra flinched. She looked back at the house where Blake was still watching from the shadows. "Things are a little tight right now," she lied. "The market is down. And Blake, he has some opportunities, big opportunities. But he needs capital. If we could just access that money, it would solve everything. It would secure our future." She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was desperate. "Please, Dad, do it for me. I am so scared. I am so worried about our finances." I looked at the bruise on her wrist, partially hidden by her sweater. I looked at the terror in her eyes. She was not scared of poverty. She was scared of him. He had probably told her that if they did not get this money, they would lose the house, or he would go to jail, or maybe he had threatened her directly. It took every ounce of my discipline not to tell her the truth right then. I wanted to tell her that there was no money in Zurich. I wanted to tell her that her husband was a gambling addict who had sold us out to the mob. I wanted to tell her that on Friday we were not going to get rich, we were going to get justice. But I couldn't. If she knew, she might panic. She might try to run, and Blake would hurt her. I squeezed her hand. "I do not like moving that money, Kendra." I said, my voice grave. "It was for your children." "We will put it back," she said quickly, tears spilling over again. "I promise. We just need it for a little while. Please, Dad. If you love me, please do this." That was the knife. If you love me. He had weaponized her love against me. I sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to come from the bottom of my soul. "Okay," I said. "I will do it. For you." Kendra slumped against me, sobbing with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Dad." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. I held her while she cried, looking over her head at the figure in the doorway. Blake gave me a thumbs up. A thumbs up, as if we were partners, as if he hadn't just forced his wife to beg her father for his life savings. I stared at him, my face impassive, but inside I was screaming. Friday, I thought. I patted Kendra's back. "Don't cry, baby girl," I said. "It will all be over on Friday." I stood up. "I need to rest now," I said. "Tell Blake to have the car ready at 9 a.m. on Friday. I want to get this over with." I walked past her toward the house. As I approached the door, Blake stepped aside to let me pass. He was beaming. "You are doing the right thing, Vic," he said, clapping me on the back. "You are a good father." I stopped. I looked at him. I looked at the neck that I wanted to snap. "I am doing what needs to be done," I said. I went to my room and locked the door. I went to the calendar on the wall. I took a red marker and circled Friday. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was survive 2 more nights in a house with a wolf who thought he was about to become a king. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked the load in my revolver. It was fully loaded, just like me. Friday was coming, and Blake Anderson had no idea that he had just booked a one-way ticket to his own destruction. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. It was the kind of gray that promised rain, but held it back just to make the air heavy and hard to breathe. I stood on the porch with a black duffel bag in my hand. It was an old bag, one I used to carry my gym clothes in back when I still had the knees for boxing. Today it was empty, but by the time I came back, it would be filled with the weight of a man's life. Blake pulled the car around. He was driving his Mercedes today, not the SUV. He had washed it. It gleamed in the dull light. He got out and opened the passenger door for me, a gesture he had not made in 3 years. "Good morning, Vic," he said. His voice was tight, vibrating with a caffeine buzz that was bordering on mania. "Ready to go?" I nodded slowly and climbed in. The leather seat was cold. Blake got in the driver's side and adjusted the mirror. He He checked his blind spot. He put both hands on the wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. I almost laughed. Here was a man who had cut the brake lines of my truck 3 days ago trying to send me plunging to my death. Now he was driving like a student in a driver's education course. He was terrified that a fender bender or a speeding ticket would stop us from getting to the bank. He needed me alive for exactly 2 more hours. We pulled out onto the main road. He kept it exactly at the speed limit. Every time a car braked in front of us, he slowed down gently, leaving 3 car lengths of distance. "You are driving very carefully today, Blake," I said, staring out the window. He flinched. "Just want to get you there safely, Vic. The roads are slick." I reached into my breast pocket. I felt the small rectangular shape of the digital recorder. I slid my thumb over the switch and felt the tiny vibration that meant it was recording. "I have been thinking," I said, keeping my voice soft and wavering. $5 million is a lot of money. Maybe we should not take it all. Maybe we should leave some for Kendra." Blake's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. "No, Vic," he said quickly. "We talked about this. It is not safe in the bank anymore. The IRS could freeze it. We need to move all of it. We are doing this to protect Kendra, remember?" I turned my head and looked at him. I wanted this for the jury. "So we take the cash I asked, and we bring it back to the house. And then what?" "Then we put it in the wall safe," Blake said, his eyes fixed on the road. "And we invest it. I have a guy. We can double it in 6 months. It is for the family, Vic." "For the family," I repeated. I had what I needed. He had just confirmed on tape that he intended to take possession of the funds and that he was manipulating a confused old man to do it. The rest of the ride was silent. The air in the car was thick with his greed and my hatred. I could smell his cologne, a musky, expensive scent that tried to hide the smell of a man who was rotting from the inside out. I closed my eyes and visualized the map of the city. We were passing the old steel mill, then the park, then the bridge. We were getting closer to the kill zone. We pulled up in front of the First National Bank downtown. It was a fortress of stone and marble, a relic from a time when banks looked like temples. Blake parked the car and practically sprinted around to open my door. He grabbed my elbow to help me up the curb. "Easy there, Vic," he said. "Don't trip." We walked into the lobby. It was quiet, the hushed silence of money sleeping. The air conditioning was cold. I walked straight to the reception desk. The young woman looked up. "Mr. Stone," she said, recognizing me. "It has been a long time. I need to access my safety deposit box," I said. "And I need to see Mr. Davis." 5 minutes later, Mr. Davis walked out. He was the branch manager, a man I had known for 20 years. I had called him yesterday. He knew exactly what was happening, though he did not know the violent details. "He just knew I was setting a trap for a con artist," Mr. Stone Davis said, shaking my hand warmly. "Good to see you. And this must be your son-in-law." Blake nodded impatiently. "We are in a bit of a hurry." "Of course," Davis said. "Follow me." He led us down the marble staircase to the vault. The heavy steel gate buzzed open. We walked into the room lined with thousands of metal drawers. The air smelled of dust and copper. "Box 402, I said. Davis led us to a large box at eye level. He inserted his master key. I inserted my key. The lock tumbled with a heavy, satisfying click. Blake stepped forward, his breath hot on my neck. He was ready to grab. I stopped. I turned to him. "Blake," I said, my voice suddenly firm. "Give me a minute." What he asked, confused. "Why?" "I need a moment alone," I said. "This money represents 40 years of my life. It is my blood and sweat. I want to say goodbye to it in private before I hand it over to you." "Vic, we do not have time for sentiment," Blake hissed, looking at the door where Davis was standing. I stared at him. I hardened my gaze just enough to let him know I was serious, but not enough to break character. "If you don't step out, I don't open the box," I said. Blake ground his teeth. He looked at the box, then at me. He calculated the risk. He decided that humor me was the fastest way to the cash. "Fine," he spat. "1 minute. I will be right outside the gate." He turned and marched out, pacing just beyond the steel bars. I stepped into the small private viewing booth with the long metal box. Davis followed me in and closed the door. There were no cameras in the viewing booth. Privacy was the ultimate commodity here. I opened the lid. Inside there was no money. There were no bearer bonds. There was just a single manila envelope containing the original deed to the trucking depot and my original will. I took the envelope out and handed it to Davis. "Put this in box 619, I whispered, "the one only I have the key to." Davis nodded and slipped the envelope into his jacket. He reached under the table and pulled out a stack of newspapers he had prepared for me. The Wall Street Journal, cut into precise bill-sized rectangles. I took the stacks. They felt heavy, dense. I opened my black duffel bag. I started stacking the newspaper bricks inside. One by one, I packed them tight. I layered them so the bag would bulge in all the right places. I worked quickly, my heart pounding a rhythm of vengeance. Every stack of paper was a lie I was feeding him. Every brick was a weight I was about to hang around his neck. I filled the bag to the top. It weighed about 20 pounds, the same weight as 5 million in mixed bills. I zipped it shut. I looked at the metal deposit box. It was empty now, empty like Blake's soul, empty like his future. I closed the lid. I nodded to Davis. "Let's go," I said. I picked up the bag. It pulled on my shoulder. It felt good. It felt like a weapon. I opened the door of the viewing booth. Blake was gripping the steel bars of the gate, his face pressed between them like a prisoner. When he saw the bag, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He did not see a gym bag. He saw Ferraris. He saw penthouses. He saw his debts vanishing. I walked toward him, letting my steps be heavy, letting the bag drag slightly as if it was too much for me to carry. Blake signaled for Davis to open the gate. As soon as the buzzer sounded, he rushed in. He did not ask if I was okay. He reached for the bag. "Let me take that," he said. I pulled it back. "No," I said. "I will carry it to the car." I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to walk behind me, seeing the prize just out of reach. We walked up the stairs. The lobby seemed brighter now. The air seemed lighter. I had just committed the perfect heist. I had stolen nothing, but I had taken everything from him. We got to the car. Blake opened the trunk. "Put it in here," he said. I dropped the bag into the trunk. It landed with a solid thud. "Is it all there?" Blake asked. He could not help himself. He had to know. I looked at him. I gave him a sad, tired smile. "Every penny," I said. "It is all there, Blake. All the dreams I ever had." He slammed the trunk shut. The sound was like a gunshot. He laughed. A short, sharp bark of laughter. "You did good, Vic," he said. "You did really good." He walked around to the driver's side. He had a bounce in his step. He thought he had just won the game. He thought he was the smartest man in the world. I got into the passenger seat. I buckled my seatbelt. "Drive," I said. Blake started the engine. He peeled out of the bank parking lot a little faster this time. He was eager to get home. He was eager to count the money. He had no idea that he was driving a hearse. And he had no idea that the man sitting next to him was not his victim, but his executioner. We merged onto the highway. The city skyline retreated behind us. I watched the buildings fade in the side mirror. "I hope you enjoy the ride, Blake," I thought, "because it is the last ride you will ever take as a free man." I touched the recorder in my pocket one last time to make sure it was safe. Then I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, listening to him hum a tune under his breath. It was a happy tune. Ignorance truly was bliss, but knowledge was power, and I had all of it. The drive back to the estate was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Blake was vibrating with a manic energy, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, humming a tune that sounded like a funeral dirge to my ears. He drove fast now, speeding through yellow lights, his eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror as if he expected the police or his creditors to materialize out of thin air. The black duffel bag sat on the back seat, heavy and silent, a Trojan horse filled with nothing but bad news. I stared out the window, watching the familiar landmarks of my neighborhood roll by, knowing that by the time the sun went down, this peaceful suburban street would be a crime scene. We pulled into the driveway, and the tires crunched on the gravel. Blake didn't even turn off the engine before he popped the trunk. He was out of the door before the car had come to a complete stop. I took my time unbuckling my seatbelt, savoring the cool air conditioning for one last moment. By the time I climbed out, Blake had already grabbed the bag. He was hugging it to his chest like a long-lost child. "Let's go inside, Vic," he said, breathless. "We need to count it. We need to secure it." He marched toward the front door, leaving me to shuffle behind him. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, playing the part of the exhausted old man one last time. We entered the house, and the air was cool and still. Kendra was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in her room or the garden, afraid to face the father she had just betrayed. Blake dumped the bag onto the dining room table. It hit the wood with a heavy, solid thud. He looked at it with hunger in his eyes. This was it. The moment of salvation. The moment his debts would vanish and he would become the king of the castle. "Open it," he whispered, looking at me. "You have the honor, Vic." I shook my head. "No, Blake," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You do it. My hands are too shaky. I just want a glass of water." He didn't argue. He didn't care about me anymore. I was just a delivery system that had served its purpose. He grabbed the zipper tab. The sound of the zipper tearing open was the loudest thing in the house. It sounded like a fabric scream. Blake reached in with both hands, expecting to feel the crisp, cool texture of high-denomination bonds. Instead, his fingers brushed against coarse, dry newsprint. He frowned, confusion clouding his face for a split second. He grabbed a handful and pulled. A brick of cut-up Wall Street Journal fell onto the table. Then another. Then another. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed but failed to detonate immediately. Blake stared at the pile of paper. He picked up a strip. It was the market recap from yesterday. He looked into the bag. It was full of paper. Just paper. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He upturned the bag. The blocks of newspaper tumbled out, cascading over the mahogany table and spilling onto the floor. It was a waterfall of worthless trash. "Where is it?" Blake screamed. The sound tore through the house. He spun around to face me, his face turning a shade of purple I had never seen before. The veins in his neck were bulging like cords. "Where is the money?" he roared, advancing on me. "You old fool, you grabbed the wrong bag." "Tell me you grabbed the wrong bag." I stood by the sideboard, gripping my cane. I looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "I don't understand," I stammered. "It was right there. Mr. Davis put it in the bag. I saw him." "You are lying," Blake shrieked. He swept the paper off the table with a violent swipe of his arm. He was hyperventilating now. His eyes were darting around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. "It is gone," he moaned, grabbing his hair. "It is all gone. They are going to kill me. They are going to cut me into pieces." Then the panic turned into something darker. He looked at me. He stopped seeing a father-in-law. He stopped seeing a human being. He saw the architect of his demise. "You did this," he hissed. "You senile old bat. You messed it up." He reached behind his back under his jacket. I knew what was coming. I had seen the bulge in his waistband earlier. Blake pulled out a snub-nosed revolver. It was a cheap, ugly gun, the kind you buy in an alleyway for cash. He pointed it straight at my chest. The barrel was shaking, but at this range he couldn't miss. "I am going to kill you," he said, his voice dropping to a guttural growl. "If I am going down, I am taking you with me. Blake, no." The scream came from the hallway. Kendra ran into the room, her eyes wide with terror. She saw the gun. She saw the paper on the floor. She saw her husband pointing a weapon at her father. "Put it down," she screamed, throwing herself between us. "Blake, what are you doing? Move, Kendra!" Blake shouted, waving the gun. "Get out of the way! He ruined everything. He lost the money. We can fix it," Kendra cried, reaching for his arm. "We can find another way. Just put the gun down, please." She grabbed his wrist. It was a mistake. Blake wasn't her husband anymore. He was a cornered animal. "Get off me!" he yelled. He swung his arm back. The heavy pistol whipped through the air. The barrel connected with Kendra's cheekbone with a sickening crack. My daughter crumbled to the floor without a sound. Time seemed to freeze. I watched her fall. I saw the blood start to well up on her face. And in that moment, the last remnant of Victor Stone, the retiree, evaporated. The man who stood in the dining room was not a grandfather. He was a soldier who had just watched the enemy strike his unit. Blake looked down at his wife, but there was no remorse in his eyes, only madness. He looked back at me, raising the gun again. "See what you made me do," he spat. "This is your fault. All of it. I needed that money, Vic. I owe $2 million to the Chicago outfit. They gave me until 5 o'clock today. Do you hear me? Today." He was confessing. He was spilling his guts because he thought he was talking to a dead man. "I did everything right," he ranted, pacing back and forth, keeping the gun trained on me. "I cut your brake lines perfectly. You should have gone over that cliff. You should have been a tragic accident. Then I could have sold the company and paid them off. But no. You had to survive. You had to be lucky." He laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "So I tried the pills." He continued, "Dr. Evans gave me enough toxin to stop an elephant's heart. But you would not die. You just got more confused. So I had to do this. I had to rob you. And you couldn't even get that right." He cocked the hammer of the gun. The click echoed in the silent room. I am done playing games, Vic. I am going to shoot you. Then I am going to burn this house down. They will find your body and think you went crazy and started a fire. I will take the insurance money. It won't be $5 million, but it will be enough to buy me a plane ticket to disappear. He took a step closer. The muzzle of the gun was 5 feet from my heart. Say goodbye, Vic, he whispered. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat dripping down his face. I looked at the trembling hand holding the weapon. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders drop. I unclenched my hands. I straightened my spine. I grew 2 inches taller in a single second. The tremor in my head stopped. The fog in my eyes cleared, replaced by a gaze as sharp and cold as a diamond cutter. I tossed my cane aside. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. I didn't need it. I never needed it. Blake blinked. He faltered. He saw the transformation. He saw the frailty vanish, and something terrified him more than the mob. He saw competence. You are not going to shoot me, Blake, I said. My voice was not the weak, reedy whisper he was used to. It was the deep, booming baritone that had commanded men and machines for 40 years. It was the voice of authority. Blake took a step back, the gun wavering. What he stammered. What is happening? I took a step forward. I walked with the steady, predatory grace of a man who has walked into danger 1,000 times. I said, put the gun down, son, I said, locking eyes with him. You have already lost. You just don't know it yet. How are you doing that? Blake whispered, fear creeping into his voice. You are sick. You are senile. I am not sick, I said, taking another step. And I am not senile. I am just a better actor than you are. I reached into my pocket. Blake flinched, almost pulling the trigger. But I moved slowly, deliberately. I pulled out the digital recorder. The tiny red light was still blinking. I held it up. I have everything recorded, Blake, I said calmly. The brake lines, the poison, the debt to the Chicago mob, and just now, the confession that you planned to murder me and burn my house down. It is all here, and it is already streaming to a cloud server that my lawyer has access to. Blake stared at the recorder. His face went pale. You played me, he whispered. I played you. I confirmed. I knew about the brakes the moment I crawled out of the truck. I knew about the debt 3 days ago. I switched the pills. I poured the coffee on the papers, and those newspapers on the floor. I packed them myself in the vault while you were pacing outside like a greedy child. I took one more step. I was close enough to smell his fear. There is no money, Blake, I said. There never was. The only thing in that bank vault was a trap, and you walked right into it. Blake looked at the gun in his hand, then at me. He was calculating his odds. He could shoot me. He could destroy the recorder. Don't even think about it, I said, reading his mind. The police are already on their way. My security team is in the garden, and Manny is probably aiming a rifle at your head through the window right now. I pointed to the window behind him. Blake flinched and looked. There was no one there, but the distraction was all I needed. I lunged, not to hit him, not yet. I just needed to close the distance. You are done, Blake, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You are not a killer. You are just a thief with a gambling problem. And now you are a prisoner. Blake began to shake uncontrollably. The gun lowered. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The old man he thought he was bullying was actually the one holding all the cards. He looked at Kendra, who was starting to stir on the floor. He looked at the paper money. He looked at me. It is over, I said. Drop the gun. For a second I thought he might do the right thing, but a rat is most dangerous when it is trapped. His eyes hardened. He raised the gun again, not at me, but at the door. I am not going to jail, he screamed, but he wasn't going anywhere, because the front door burst open. The wind from the open door howled through the hallway, but it brought no salvation. It was just a gust of the coming storm slamming the heavy oak door against the wall. For a split second I thought it was Manny. I thought it was the police. But the driveway was empty. It was just nature reminding us that a storm was brewing outside to match the one inside. Blake reacted with the speed of a frightened rat. He kicked the door shut and threw the deadbolt. He grabbed a handful of Kendra's hair and dragged her backward into the living room. She screamed a sound that tore through my heart, but I stood frozen. The gun was waving wild and erratic between my head and hers. Move back, Vic, Blake screamed. Get in the living room. Sit on the couch. Now. I did as I was told. I walked slowly to the leather sofa and sat down. My eyes never left the gun. It was a cheap .38 special, short barrel, heavy recoil. In the hands of a shaking amateur, it was more dangerous than a cannon. Blake shoved Kendra onto the floor next to the coffee table. She was sobbing, holding her cheek where the pistol had struck her. Blood was seeping through her fingers, staining her white blouse. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to wrap my hands around Blake's throat and squeeze until the light went out of his eyes. But I was 5 feet away, and a bullet travels faster than an old man. Blake was pacing now. He was hyperventilating. He pulled his phone out of his pocket with his left hand while keeping the gun trained on us with his right. He dialed a number. I knew who he was calling. He was calling the Reaper. "Pick up," Blake muttered, sweat pouring down his face. "Pick up, you son of a bitch." The call connected. Blake put it on speaker, likely because his hands were shaking too much to hold it to his ear. "Where is my money?" Blake, a voice boomed from the speaker. It was deep, calm, and terrifying. It was the voice of a man who killed people while eating his lunch. "I don't have it yet," Blake stammered. "There was a complication. The bank, the old man messed it up. But listen to me, I have leverage." "Leverage?" The voice laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You have until 5 o'clock, Blake. It is 4:15. You do not have leverage. You have a death sentence." "No, wait," Blake shouted. "I have the house, I have the girl, and I have the old man. I am going to torch the place. The insurance payout will cover everything. I just need a week. Give me 1 week." "You have 45 minutes, the voice said. "After that, we are coming to collect. And we are not taking a check." The line went dead. Blake stared at the phone. He looked like a man who had just heard the trapdoor of the gallows open beneath his feet. He looked at me. His eyes were wide and white, rimmed with red. He was drowning in panic. "This is it," he whispered. He dropped the phone on the carpet. He raised the gun and pointed it directly at my forehead. The barrel was steady now. Desperation had given him a new kind of focus. "I am going to kill you first," Blake said. His voice was flat, dead. "Then I am going to kill her. Then I am going to burn this whole lie to the ground. Maybe if everyone is dead, they will leave me alone." I looked at the black hole of the muzzle. I looked at the finger tightening on the trigger. I knew I had about 10 seconds before he pulled it. Logic had left the building. He was operating on pure animal instinct now, fight or flight. And he had chosen to fight the only people he could defeat, an old man and a wounded woman. I had to break his focus. I had to make him think. I had to pull him out of his reptilian brain and back into his ego. "You are a pathetic excuse for a man, Blake," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather and not my execution. Blake blinked. "What did you say to me?" I leaned back on the couch and crossed my legs. I looked at him with pure, unadulterated pity. "I said you are pathetic," I repeated. "Look at you. You are shaking like a leaf. You are holding a gun you don't know how to use. You are threatening a woman because you are too weak to face your own mistakes." "Shut up," Blake yelled. He took a step closer. "I have the gun. I am in charge here. You have a prop." I scoffed. "You are playing dress-up. You think holding a piece of metal makes you a tough guy." "I have known tough guys, Blake. I grew up with men who would eat you for breakfast and pick their teeth with your bones. They didn't need guns to command respect. They had honor. You have nothing." "Shut up, old man," Blake screamed. "I mean it. You are a tourist in a man's world," I continued, raising my voice, letting the contempt drip from every syllable. "You thought you could come into my house, steal my money, and hurt my daughter. You thought you were smarter than the trucker. But look at you. You were played by a senior citizen. I tricked you with a bag of newspapers. I switched your poison pills. I ran circles around you, and I didn't even have to get out of my chair." Blake was turning red. The veins in his neck were throbbing. The gun was wavering again as his anger fought with his aim. "I am going to blow your brains out," he hissed. "Go ahead," I challenged him. "Do it. Pull the trigger. But know this. When you do, you prove me right. You prove that you are just a coward who couldn't handle a fair fight. You prove that you are a failure as a husband, a failure as a businessman, and a failure as a man." I stood up slowly. I made myself a target. I wanted his eyes on me, only on me. "Your father would be ashamed of you," I said. "He was a hard worker. He was a good man. He raised a son who turned out to be a thief and a wife-beater." "Don't talk about my father," Blake shrieked. He lunged forward, closing the distance. He wanted to hit me. He wanted to pistol whip me like he did Kendra. That was what I wanted. I needed him close, but not too close. I needed him blind with rage. I looked down at Kendra. She was looking up at me, terrified. But in her eyes, I saw something else. Trust. She knew I had a plan. She knew her father didn't just talk to hear his own voice. I looked back at Blake. "You are going to die in prison, Blake," I said. "And do you know the best part? You are going to die poor." Blake roared and raised the gun high above his head to bring it down on my skull. He had forgotten about shooting. He wanted to smash. He wanted to destroy the voice that was tearing him apart. In that split second, while his arm was raised and his eyes were blinded by red fury, I made my move. I grabbed my chest. I let out a gasp, a loud, ragged sound of air leaving lungs. I crumpled. I didn't fall toward him. I fell back onto the couch, sliding down until I was halfway on the floor. My left arm, the one wearing the watch, flailed out and hit the coffee table hard. My heart, I groaned. My heart. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Blake froze. His arm was still raised, but the blow didn't come. He looked down at me, confused. The adrenaline that was fueling his rage suddenly had nowhere to go. What he stammered, "Get up! Don't you dare die on me yet!" I writhed on the floor, clutching my chest with my right hand. But my left hand, the one resting on the wood of the coffee table, was busy. I twisted my wrist. I found the small raised button on the side of my heavy diving watch. It wasn't the time adjustment knob. It was a custom modification Manny had installed 3 years ago when I started carrying large amounts of cash. Press and hold for 3 seconds. 1. Blake lowered the gun. He kicked my leg. "Get up, Vic. Stop acting." 2. I let out a long, wheezing breath. My eyes rolled back in my head. 3. I felt the watch vibrate against my wrist. A single short pulse. Signal received. The silent alarm had just been broadcast to Manny's phone and to the private security firm I kept on retainer. They were not 5 miles away. They were outside. They had been waiting for the signal to breach. I went limp. I lay on the carpet, staring up at the ceiling through half-closed eyelids. Blake panicked. He dropped to his knees beside me. He didn't care about saving my life. He cared about his leverage. If I died of a heart attack, he couldn't threaten to kill me. "Vic," he yelled, slapping my face. "Vic, wake up." He put his hand on my chest. He was checking for a heartbeat. He was so focused on me. He was so focused on the fact that his hostage was expiring. He forgot about the room. He forgot about the window. He forgot about the time. I lay there feeling his sweaty hand on my shirt. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. I knew Manny. I knew his team. They were professionals. They wouldn't knock. They wouldn't ring the bell. Blake stood up frustrated. He looked at Kendra. "Check him," he barked at her. "See if he is breathing." Kendra crawled over to me. She put her hand on my face. Her fingers were cold. She leaned close to my ear. "Dad," she whispered, "please." I squeezed her hand, a tiny, imperceptible squeeze, just enough for her to feel. She froze. She looked at my face. I gave her the slightest wink. She understood. She turned to Blake. "He is barely breathing," she cried, playing her part perfectly. "He is dying, Blake. You killed him." Blake ran his hands through his hair. He began to pace again. "No, no, no," he muttered. This wasn't the plan. He walked to the window to look out. He wanted to see if the coast was clear to run. That was his mistake. As he peered through the curtains, a shadow moved across the glass. Blake didn't see it. He was looking for police cars. He wasn't looking for men in black tactical gear moving through the rhododendrons. I sat up. Blake turned around, hearing the movement. His eyes widened when he saw me rising from the floor, not dying, but angry. "You," he gasped. "You really should have checked my pulse yourself," I said. And then the glass exploded. The glass shattered with a deafening crash as the tactical team breached the living room window. But Blake moved with the desperate speed of a cornered rat. He did not surrender, and he did not freeze. Instead, he grabbed Kendra by her hair with his left hand and jammed the barrel of the gun into my ribs with his right. "Move!" he screamed over the sound of shouting voices and crunching glass. He shoved us toward the narrow door under the staircase, the one that led to the darkness below. I stumbled, my feet tangling in the carpet, but he kicked me forward. We tumbled down the wooden steps into the gloom of the basement just as the first flashbang detonated upstairs. Blake slammed the heavy oak door at the top of the stairs and threw the deadbolt. We were trapped. The police were directly above us, their heavy boots thudding on the floorboards like thunder, but they could not shoot through the floor without risking hitting the hostages. Blake had turned the foundation of my home into a tomb. He shoved us into the corner where the cold cinder block walls met. The air down here was stale, smelling of mold and old memories, and now the sharp metallic tang of terror. Blake found a coil of heavy orange extension cords hanging on the workbench. He didn't speak. He worked with a manic, silent intensity. He wrapped the thick plastic cord around my wrists, pulling it so tight I felt my skin tear. He tied my ankles together. Then he did the same to Kendra. He trussed us up like livestock waiting for the butcher. I looked at him in the dim light of the single naked bulb hanging from the ceiling. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking at the ceiling, tracking the movement of the SWAT team above. He was calculating how long he had before they brought a battering ram to the basement door. The silence in the basement was amplified by the chaos upstairs. Blake began to pace in the small circle of yellow light. He was muttering to himself a stream of curses and fragmented plans. He looked at the small basement window high up on the wall, but it was too small for a man to fit through. He was sealed in. Kendra was weeping softly beside me. Her cheek was swelling rapidly, turning a dark, angry purple where the gun had struck her. She looked up at the man she had married, the man she had defended against my suspicions for 3 years. The denial in her eyes was heartbreaking. She still could not believe that the monster pacing in front of us was her husband. "Blake," she sobbed, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? We can still fix this. I can talk to the police. I can tell them it was a misunderstanding. I can tell them you were scared." Blake stopped pacing. He turned slowly to look at her. The expression on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was something far worse. It was pure, unadulterated disgust. He looked at her the way a man looks at a piece of gum stuck to his shoe. "Shut up, Kendra," he spat. The venom in his voice made her flinch. "There is no fixing this. No. And there is no we. Stop talking like we are a team. We were never a team." Kendra blinked, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood from her cut cheek. "But I love you," she whispered. "We are husband and wife. You love me, Blake. I know you do." Blake laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that echoed off the concrete walls, chilling me to the bone. "Love," he mocked. "You are so stupid. You really think I married you for love? Look at you, Kendra. Take a good look at yourself. You are plain. You are boring. You have no style. You have no ambition. You are a daddy's girl who never had to work for anything. The only interesting thing about you was your last name and the 7-figure bank account attached to it." "I didn't marry a woman, Kendra. I married an ATM. I married a stepping stone." Kendra went still. The sobbing stopped instantly. The shock of his words was more violent than the blow from the gun. I watched the light inside my daughter die. I watched the illusion she had built her life around crumble into dust. He continued twisting the knife, enjoying the pain he was inflicting. "I spent 3 years pretending to listen to your stupid stories about your garden club. I spent 3 years eating your bland cooking and pretending to like your friends. I woke up every morning and looked at your face and counted the days until this old man would die so I could cash out and leave. And he wouldn't die. He just wouldn't die. So, here we are. You are useless to me now, Kendra. You are just baggage, and baggage gets left behind." The cruelty of his words hung in the stagnant air like poison gas. I watched my daughter's face change. The confusion vanished. The heartbreak hardened. She looked at him, and for the first time she saw him clearly. She saw the small petty thief hiding inside the expensive suit. Blake turned away from us, dismissing us completely. He walked toward the far corner of the basement where I kept the lawnmower and the spare fuel cans. I knew instantly what he was going to do. He couldn't shoot his way out. He couldn't negotiate. So he was going to create chaos. He was going to burn the evidence. He was going to incinerate his failure and hope to escape in the smoke. He grabbed a red jerry can and shook it. It sloshed heavily. 5 gallons of high-octane gasoline. He began to unscrew the cap, his back turned to us. This was my chance. It was the only chance we would get. I leaned close to Kendra. Her head was bowed. She was staring at the concrete floor. "Kendra," I whispered, "listen to me." She didn't move. She was in shock. "Kendra, look at me," I hissed. I nudged her shoulder hard with mine. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes were empty, like the windows of an abandoned house. "He is going to burn us," I said, keeping my voice low and urgent. "We have to move." She shook her head slightly. "Let him do it," she whispered. "I don't care anymore. Let it burn." "No," I said sternly, my voice sharp enough to cut through her despair. "You do not give up. You are a stone. You are my daughter. You do not let a man like that decide when you die. Now listen to me. In the inside pocket of my jacket on the left side, there is a small pocket knife. I always carry it. My hands are tied behind my back, but yours are tied in front. You have to reach inside my jacket and get it." Kendra looked at Blake's back, then at me. She hesitated. She was trembling uncontrollably. "Move, Kendra," I commanded. "Reach in. Save yourself. Save me." She took a deep, shuddering breath. She leaned forward. Her hands were bound tight at the wrists, but she had enough movement to reach my chest. Her fingers fumbled with the lapel of my jacket. She slid her hand inside. I could feel her shaking against me. Her fingers brushed against my ribs. She searched blindly. She found it. It was a small, folding buck knife with a bone handle. She pulled it out, trying to be silent. The metallic click of the knife hitting a button on my jacket sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Blake didn't turn around. He was too busy splashing gasoline on the wooden stairs, blocking our only exit. "Open it," I whispered. "Use your teeth if you have to." She brought the knife to her mouth. She clamped her teeth on the blade and pulled it open. The steel glinted in the dim light. "Now cut the cord," I said. "Cut yourself free first." She began to saw at the thick orange plastic around her wrists. The blade was sharp. It bit through the insulation. I watched her face. Her jaw was set. The tears had stopped. She wasn't crying anymore. She was cutting. She was severing the tie to her husband with every stroke of the blade. The fumes of the gasoline began to fill the room, burning our eyes and throat. "Faster, Kendra," I urged. "Cut it." The first layer of cord snapped. She was almost free. But Blake dropped the empty gas can. It clattered to the floor. He pulled a lighter from his pocket and turned around. He smiled at us, a smile of pure madness. "Goodbye, family," he said. And he flicked the lighter. The sound of the gasoline igniting was not a bang. It was a gasp. A sudden violent intake of breath that sucked the oxygen right out of the room, followed by a low, guttural roar that vibrated through the floorboards above our heads. Blake had thrown the lighter and run out the back door, leaving us to burn in the coffin he had built. The fire moved with terrifying speed. I could hear it racing across the hardwood floors of the kitchen, devouring the cabinets and the curtains, feeding on the accelerant like a starving beast. The temperature in the basement spiked instantly. The ceiling, which was the floor of the kitchen, began to radiate heat like a broiler. Dust motes dancing in the single bulb's light began to swirl frantically as the air currents shifted. Then came the smoke. It didn't drift in lazily. It was forced in under high pressure, squeezing through the cracks in the doorframe and the gaps in the floorboards. It was thick, black, and oily. It tasted of burning varnish and melting plastic, the smell of imminent death. Kendra coughed violently, doubling over as the first wave hit her lungs. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. Her face was streaked with soot and blood. "Dad," she choked out, "we are going to die down here." The panic in her voice was rising, matching the roar of the flames above. I grabbed her shoulders. My hands were still numb from the tight cords, but I squeezed her hard. "No," I shouted over the noise. "We are not dying today. Not like this. Not for him." I looked around the basement. The stairs were already a lost cause. I could see the orange glow flickering through the cracks in the wood. If we opened that door, we would be incinerated instantly. The small window was too high and too narrow. We were trapped in a concrete box with a lid made of fire. But Blake had made one fatal miscalculation. He forgot who built this house. He saw a basement. I saw a bunker. When I poured this foundation 20 years ago, I was still looking over my shoulder for shadows from my past. I didn't trust front doors, and I certainly didn't trust dead ends. I pulled Kendra toward the far wall where a heavy oak wine rack stood floor to ceiling. It was filled with dusty bottles of vintage reds and whites, mostly gifts from clients that I never drank. "Help me move this," I ordered. Kendra looked at the massive piece of furniture, then at me. "It is too heavy," she cried. "The smoke is getting too thick." "Just push," I roared. Push like your life depends on it, because it does. We put our shoulders against the wood. The heat was becoming unbearable now. My skin felt like it was blistering. We drove our legs into the concrete floor and shoved. The rack groaned. It scraped an inch, then another. The bottles rattled violently, clinking against each other like chattering teeth. One fell and shattered, splashing red wine across the floor like blood. Push, I screamed. We gave one final heave and the rack swung away from the wall, revealing not concrete, but a patch of drywall that looked slightly different from the rest. It was a false panel. Behind that drywall was an old coal chute I had converted into a ventilation shaft that led out to the garden shed. It was tight and dirty, but it was a way out. But first, we had to get through the wall. I looked around for a tool, a crowbar, a hammer, anything. My eyes landed on an old rusted sledgehammer leaning against the workbench. I lunged for it, but as I tried to lift it, my knees buckled. The smoke inhalation combined with the stress and the medication withdrawal hit me all at once. My arms felt like wet noodles. The hammer slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. I fell to my knees, gasping for air that wasn't there. Dad, Kendra screamed, dropping to my side. "Get up!" I shook my head, coughing. "I can't," I wheezed. "I don't have the strength. You have to do it, Kendra. You have to break the wall." She looked at the hammer, then at the wall, then back at me. "I can't," she sobbed. "I am not strong enough." I looked at my daughter, the girl who had been told for 3 years that she was useless, the girl who had been convinced she was weak. "Listen to me," I rasped, grabbing her arm. "That wall is Blake. That wall is every lie he ever told you. That wall is every time he made you feel small. Do not hit the wall, Kendra. Hit him. Break him." Something shifted in her eyes. The fear didn't leave, but it was joined by something hotter and fiercer. Rage. She stood up. She wiped the blood and soot from her face. She reached down and grabbed the handle of the sledgehammer. It was heavy, but she lifted it. She didn't hold it like a construction worker. She held it like a weapon. She turned to the wall. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was a primal release of 3 years of suppressed anger. She swung. The hammerhead impacted the drywall with a thunderous crack. Dust exploded into the air, mixing with the smoke. She swung again and again. With every blow, she was exorcising a demon. She wasn't just breaking gypsum and wood. She was shattering the image of the submissive wife. She was destroying the victim she had become. I watched her through the haze. Her hair was wild. Her blouse was torn. Her muscles were straining. She looked magnificent. She looked like a stone. A hole opened up. Cool, fresh air rushed in from the tunnel, mingling with the heat of the fire. It was the sweetest scent I had ever smelled. "One more, Kendra," I shouted. "Make it wide enough." She gave one final scream and swung the hammer with everything she had left. The wall crumbled. A jagged opening large enough for a person appeared. She dropped the hammer, breathing hard, her chest heaving. "Go, Dad," she gasped, reaching for me. "Go." I crawled toward the hole. The house above us gave a sickening lurch. A massive timber beam crashed down onto the basement floor just feet behind us, sending a shower of sparks and burning debris across the room. The ceiling was coming down. "Go!" I yelled, pushing her toward the tunnel. "You first. I am right behind you." She didn't argue. She dove into the dark, narrow shaft. I followed, dragging my body through the tight space. The tunnel was rough, lined with brick and old mortar that scraped my skin raw. It was pitch black. I could hear Kendra ahead of me scrambling on her hands and knees. "Faster, baby girl," I urged. "The fire is right behind us." I could feel the heat sucking at my heels. The air in the tunnel was getting hotter as the fire sought a new source of oxygen. The sound of the house dying was deafening now. It sounded like the skeleton of a giant beast snapping apart bone by bone. We crawled for what felt like miles, but was only 20 feet. Up ahead, I saw a grate with slivers of moonlight cutting through. Kendra kicked the grate. It flew open. She scrambled out and reached back in, grabbing my collar, pulling me, dragging me into the night. We tumbled out onto the grass of the backyard. The cool night air hit my face like a bucket of ice water. I rolled onto my back, gasping, sucking in huge lungfuls of clean oxygen. The grass was wet with dew. It felt like heaven. I sat up and looked back. The house was an inferno. Flames were shooting 20 feet into the night sky from the roof. The windows had blown out. The structure was consumed. It was a terrifying, beautiful sight. My legacy was burning. The photos, the furniture, the clothes, everything I owned was gone. But as I looked at Kendra sitting beside me, shivering but alive, I realized I had lost nothing of value. She was staring at the fire, her face illuminated by the orange glow. She looked different. The softness was gone. The naivety was gone. She looked like a survivor. We stood up slowly. The heat from the house was intense even from here. We retreated into the shadows of the rhododendron bushes at the edge of the property line. We needed to be invisible. We needed to watch the final act of this tragedy play out. "Look," I whispered, pointing toward the front of the house. Through the side yard we could see the driveway. Blake was standing there. He was pacing back and forth, acting out his performance for an audience of none. He was holding his phone, presumably waiting to call 911 until he was sure we were dead. He looked frantic. He looked desperate. He had no idea that the ghosts he thought he had created were watching him from the darkness. He had no idea that behind him in the shadows of the trees, Manny and my security team were moving into positions silent as death. I put my arm around Kendra. She flinched, then leaned into me. Her body was solid, strong. We watched the roof of the house collapse inward with a spectacular crash, sending a fountain of sparks into the sky. It was over. The old Victor Stone was dead. He died in that fire. The man standing in the garden was someone else entirely, and he was ready for war. "Stay here," I told Kendra, my voice low and steady. "Stay hidden. I have one more thing to do." She grabbed my arm. "Dad, don't. He has a gun." I looked at her and smiled. A cold, hard smile. "So do I," said, tapping my chest where my heart beat strong and steady. "But my weapon isn't made of steel. It is made of truth. And I am going to bury him with it. Watch me." I stepped out of the bushes and began to walk toward the front of the house, moving through the darkness like a wraith. The fire roared behind me, casting a long shadow that stretched out toward Blake. It was time for the dead to rise. The fire was a living, breathing monster now roaring into the night sky and consuming the structure that had been my home for 20 years. From the safety of the rhododendron bushes, I watched the performance of a lifetime taking place on the front lawn. Blake Anderson was standing in the glow of the inferno, illuminated by the dancing orange light like an actor on a hellish stage. He was putting on a show for the neighbors who had begun to gather on the sidewalk in their bathrobes and pajamas, faces pale with shock. Mrs. Higgins from next door was holding her hand to her mouth. Mr. Henderson was on his phone, presumably calling the fire department. And there in the center of it all was Blake falling to his knees and throwing his hands up to the heavens. He screamed my name. "Vic. Kendra. Oh God, someone help them." His voice was cracked and hysterical, perfectly pitched to convey the agony of a grieving son and husband. He ran toward the burning porch, then staggered back, shielding his face from the heat, pretending he was trying to find a way in. It was magnificent. It was repulsive. He was selling the lie with every fiber of his being. He wanted witnesses. He wanted everyone to see him trying to save the family he had just left to die. He wanted the narrative to be set in stone before the first siren wailed in the distance. Poor Blake, heroic Blake, the man who lost everything in a tragic accident. I watched him wipe fake tears from his eyes while sneaking a glance at the driveway, ensuring his escape route was clear. He was checking his watch. He was calculating the burn rate. He was wondering if the bodies in the basement would be unrecognizable enough to hide the bullet wound on Kendra's cheek or the cords around our wrists. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Manny. He had moved silently through the trees, leading his team of 4 private security contractors. These were not mall cops. These were ex-military men, big, silent, and professional, wearing tactical vests and carrying zip ties. Manny handed me a wet towel to wipe the soot from my face, but I pushed it away. "No, Manny," I whispered. "Let him see the dirt. Let him see the ashes. I want to look like the grave he dug for me." I turned to Kendra. She was standing tall, her back straight, her eyes dry. She was watching her husband perform, and I could see the final severance of her emotional ties. She didn't see a man anymore. She saw a predator. "Stay here with the team," I told her. "This part is for me." I stepped out of the bushes. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked. I walked with the heavy, rhythmic gait of a man who has carried weight all his life. My suit was torn and scorched. My face was blackened with smoke. My silver hair was singed. I must have looked like a demon rising from the pit. I walked straight down the center of the driveway, the fire raging behind me, casting my shadow long and dark in front of me. It stretched out until it touched Blake's kneeling form. He was in the middle of a sob when he saw the movement. He froze. He looked up. At first he squinted, thinking it was a fireman or a neighbor. Then his eyes widened. His jaw went slack. The color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a sheet of paper. He stopped breathing. He stopped acting. He stopped existing in the real world and entered a nightmare of his own making. He scrambled backward on his hands and heels, crab walking away from me. "No," he whispered. The sound was barely audible over the roar of the fire. "No, it is not possible." I kept walking. I didn't say a word. I just locked my eyes on his. I let him see the cold, hard truth. I was not a ghost. I was a reckoning. Blake stood up, his legs shaking so badly he nearly fell. He looked at the burning house, then back at me. He was trying to process the physics of it. He had locked the door. He had lit the fire. He had watched the flames consume the stairs. Logic dictated I should be dead. "You are dead!" he shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. "I saw you die." The neighbors turned. They saw me. Mrs. Higgins gasped and pointed. Mr. Henderson dropped his phone. They didn't understand what was happening, but they saw Victor Stone walking out of the fire. I stopped 10 feet away from him. The heat of the house was intense on my back, but I felt cold inside. Ice cold. "You missed a spot, Blake," I said. My voice was rough from the smoke, but it carried. It cut through the noise of the fire like a knife. Blake looked around wildly. He realized the neighbors were watching. He realized his narrative was crumbling. He tried to pivot. He tried to salvage the lie. "Vic," he stammered, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of terror. "Oh, thank God. You made it out. I was so worried. I tried to get in. I tried to save you." He took a step toward me, holding his arms out as if to hug me. "Don't," I said. The single word stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Manny stepped out of the shadows then. He was holding a tire iron in his hand. Not a weapon of war, but a tool of his trade. He looked at Blake with a hatred that had been simmering for 3 years. Behind Manny, the 4 security guards fanned out, forming a wall between Blake and his car. Blake saw them. He saw the trap closing. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't the hero. He wasn't the victim. He was the suspect. "Where is Kendra?" he shouted, trying to regain control. "What did you do to her?" "She is safe," I said. "She is watching you, Blake. She is watching you lie." Blake's eyes darted to the bushes where Kendra stepped out, flanked by 2 guards. She looked at him with absolute indifference. He snapped. The facade broke completely. The panicked rat took over. He reached into his pocket. Not for the gun which he had lost or foolishly left inside, but for his phone, his lifeline. He needed to call his mob contacts. He needed to call a lawyer. He needed to call anyone who could get him out of this. He fumbled with the device, his fingers slick with sweat. "I need to make a call," he yelled, backing away. "I am calling the police. You people are crazy. You set this up. You burned the house down to frame me." He was typing a number frantically. I knew who he was dialing. It wasn't 911. It was the Chicago outfit. He was going to tell them the plan failed and beg for a pickup. Manny didn't wait for my order. He didn't need one. He moved with surprising speed for a big man. He closed the distance in 2 strides. Blake looked up just as Manny arrived. "This is for the brake line," Manny growled. He didn't use the tire iron. He dropped it. He used his fist. A right cross that carried 30 years of turning wrenches and lifting engine blocks. It connected squarely with the bridge of Blake's nose. The sound was sickening. A wet crunch of cartilage and bone giving way. Blake didn't scream. He didn't have time. His head snapped back violently. Blood exploded from his nose, spraying across his expensive white shirt. His legs turned to jelly and he collapsed onto the gravel driveway. The phone flew from his hand, spinning through the air and landing at my feet. Blake rolled on the ground, clutching his face, making gurgling sounds as he tried to breathe through the ruin of his nose. Manny stood over him, shaking his hand out. He looked at me and nodded. I looked down at the phone. It was ringing. The screen lit up. The caller ID said Tony Chicago. I looked at Blake writhing in the dirt. Then I looked at the phone. I lifted my boot. It was a heavy work boot with a steel-reinforced sole. I brought it down. I didn't just step on it. I stomped. I ground my heel into the device. Glass shattered. Plastic crunched. The silicon chips inside that held all his contacts, all his bets, all his dirty secrets were pulverized into dust against the asphalt. The connection to his masters was severed. I lifted my foot. The phone was unrecognizable. I looked at Blake. He had stopped rolling and was looking up at me through swollen, tearing eyes. Blood was pouring down his chin. "You broke my nose," he whimpered. I looked at him with zero sympathy. "You broke my heart when you hurt my daughter," I said. "Consider this a down payment on the interest." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Blue and red lights began to flash against the trees at the end of the street. The real police were arriving. "Get up, Blake," I said. "Stand up and face the music." He tried to crawl away. He tried to scramble toward the woods. "Secure him," I told the guards. Two of the men stepped forward. They hauled Blake to his feet by his armpits. He kicked and screamed, spitting blood, but they held him fast. They dragged him toward the arriving cruiser. I turned back to the fire. My house was gone. But as I stood there, surrounded by my true family, Manny and Kendra, I felt lighter than I had in years. The structure had burned down, but the foundation was still standing, and it was made of stone. The interrogation room at the precinct was a stark contrast to the chaotic inferno we had just left. It was cold and sterile, with walls painted a shade of beige that seemed designed to drain the hope out of anyone who sat between them. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low headache-inducing buzz. I sat on one side of the metal table with a blanket draped over my shoulders. My face was still streaked with soot and my suit was ruined, but I felt a strange sense of peace. Across the table, Blake was putting on the performance of his life. He was handcuffed to the chair, but his mouth was running a mile a minute. He looked like a man who was trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with a teaspoon. His nose was swollen and purple from Manny's punch, and dried blood was crusted on his upper lip. He was leaning forward, pleading with the detective, his eyes wild and desperate. "You have to listen to me," Blake stammered, his voice pitching up in hysteria. "The old man is crazy. I told you he has dementia. He has been hallucinating for weeks. He thinks people are trying to kill him. He set the fire himself. He locked us in the basement. I barely got Kendra out. I am the victim here. Why am I in handcuffs? You should be arresting him. He is a danger to himself and everyone else." The detective, a weary man named Miller with eyes that had seen too many lies, just sat there tapping his pen on a notepad. He looked from Blake to me, then back to Blake. "So you are saying Mr. Stone burned down his own estate worth $3 million and locked his own daughter in the basement because he was confused?" Miller asked, his voice flat. "Yes," Blake shouted, pulling at his cuffs. "He is sick. Dr. Evans can testify. He prescribed heavy sedatives. Victor didn't take them. He went off the rails. He threatened me with a gun. He threatened to kill us all if we didn't give him money. He is paranoid. He thinks I am stealing from him. It is all a delusion." I watched him lie. It was fascinating in a morbid way. He was weaving a tapestry of falsehoods using threads of truth. He was so convinced of his own intelligence that he thought he could talk his way out of a felony charge. He thought that if he just spoke loud enough and fast enough, reality would bend to his will. He looked at me with pure venom in his eyes, daring me to interrupt him, daring me to act the part of the senile old man one last time. But I remained silent. I just stared at him. I let him dig. I let him pile the dirt of his lies higher and higher around his own grave. "And what about the brake line?" Miller asked, glancing at his notes. "The mechanic says it was cut." Blake didn't blink. He cut it himself. Blake lied without hesitation. He did it for attention. He wanted me to feel guilty. He is manipulative. He would do anything to make me look bad. He is jealous because Kendra loves me more than him. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. He was painting me as the villain and himself as the martyr. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in Detective Miller's eyes. Blake was persuasive. He was a salesman after all. And without evidence, it was just the word of a young, grieving husband against an old man who had just walked out of a fire. That was when the door opened. The air in the room changed instantly. It wasn't a police officer who walked in. It was Marcus Abernathy, my lawyer. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Blake's car used to be worth. He carried a leather briefcase and an air of absolute authority. He didn't look at Blake. He walked straight to the table and placed the briefcase down with a solid thud. Detective Miller Abernathy said, his voice smooth as silk but hard as steel. "I represent Mr. Stone, and I believe you have some questions that need answering." "Who is this?" Blake snapped. "I don't want a lawyer. I want to go home." "Sit down and shut up, son," Miller said, his patience finally snapping. Abernathy opened the briefcase. He didn't take out a stack of papers. He took out a single silver laptop and a small black USB drive. He plugged the drive into the computer and turned the screen so Miller could see it. My client anticipated this situation, Abernathy said. Mr. Stone is a man of foresight. He knew that his word might not be enough against the manipulations of a desperate man, so he collected insurance. Insurance, Blake scoffed. What insurance? The policy is gone. Not that kind of insurance, Abernathy said coldly. He pressed a key. The video player opened. The sound was crisp and clear, filling the small room. It was the recording from the camera I had hidden in my office bookshelf. The angle was perfect. It showed Blake pacing in the dim light holding a glass of whiskey. It showed him dialing the phone, and then Blake's own voice filled the interrogation room. The old bastard is alive. That was not the deal. We cut the line exactly like you said. He should have gone over the cliff. Blake's face went white. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast it looked like he was about to faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the screen, watching himself confess to attempted murder. Abernathy didn't stop there. He clicked the next file. This is from the car ride this morning, Abernathy explained. The audio played. So we take the cash, and we bring it back to the house. It is for the family Vic. Then the sound of my voice on the recording asking about the theft, followed by Blake's affirmation of the plan. And finally, Abernathy pulled up a series of high-resolution photos. They were photos of the brake line taken by Manny showing the tool marks, and next to them a photo of a pair of bolt cutters found in the trunk of Blake's car by my security team before the police arrived. The tool marks were a perfect match. Abernathy closed the laptop. He looked at Detective Miller. We have confession of conspiracy to commit murder. We have evidence of fraud. We have witness testimony from Kendra Anderson regarding the arson and kidnapping, and we have the weapon used to sabotage the vehicle. Miller looked at Blake. His expression had shifted from skepticism to disgust. Well, Mr. Anderson Miller said, standing up and walking around the table, it seems your story has a few holes in it. Blake began to shake. It wasn't the trembling of fear anymore. It was the violent shuddering of a reality collapsing. He looked at the laptop, then at me. He realized that every moment of the last week, every stumbling step I took, every forgotten name, every spilled cup of coffee had been a move on a chessboard he didn't even know he was playing on. You recorded me, he whispered. His voice was small, broken. You set me up. I didn't set you up, Blake, I said, breaking my silence. I just turned on the lights. You did the rest yourself. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He pulled against the handcuffs, the metal biting into his wrists. He looked at the mirror on the wall, knowing his reflection was about to change from a free man to an inmate. It is not fair, he screamed, suddenly jumping up from the chair. The chair clattered back against the wall. It is not fair. I needed that money. They are going to kill me. You don't understand. The Chicago guys don't play. You have to let me go. Vic, please, you have to tell them to let me go. I sat still, watching him unravel. I can't help you, Blake, I said. You made a deal with the devil. Now payment is due. Blake lunged across the table. He tried to reach me, to choke me, to hit me, to do anything to silence the witness to his failure. But the chain on the handcuffs held him back. He snapped back, jerking his arms violently. I hate you, he shrieked, spitting flying from his mouth. I hate you and your stupid trucks and your stupid daughter. She was nothing. She was just a bank account. I should have killed her. I should have killed both of you when I had the chance. Detective Miller grabbed Blake by the shoulder and slammed him back down into the chair. That is enough, Miller barked. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you start using it before you dig a hole straight to hell. But Blake couldn't stop. The madness had taken over. He was laughing and crying at the same time, a guttural, animalistic sound. You think you won? He yelled at me, his eyes bulging. You think you are smart. You are just a lonely old man. You are going to die alone. I stood up. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. I looked down at him one last time. I am not alone, Blake, I said quietly. I have my daughter. I have my dignity. And I have my freedom. You are the one who is going to be alone, in a 6x8 cell, for a very long time. I turned to Abernathy. I am ready to go, Marcus, I said. I need to take my daughter to a hotel. We walked out of the interrogation room, leaving Blake Anderson screaming at the walls, screaming at a future that had vanished, screaming at the ghost of the man he thought he could kill. As the heavy steel door clicked shut behind me, cutting off his voice, I took the first deep breath of clean air I had tasted in days. Justice, I realized, didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash and cold rain. but it was nutritious. It was necessary. And it was done. 3 months had passed since the night the sky burned orange over my estate. 3 months is a short time in the life of a business, but it is an eternity in the life of a man locked in a cage. I did not ask for updates on Blake Anderson. I did not need them. I knew exactly where he was. He was in the county detention center awaiting trial and then transferred to a state penitentiary. But the walls of a prison can stop a man from leaving, but they cannot stop a debt from entering. The Chicago syndicate that Blake owed $2 million to was not known for its patience or its forgiveness. They did not care that his assets were frozen. They did not care that he was facing 20 years for attempted murder and arson. They only cared that their ledger was in the red. And in their world, when you cannot pay with cash, you pay with flesh. I heard the stories through the grapevine. My lawyers had ears everywhere. The first week inside, Blake walked around like he owned the place. He was still wearing the arrogance of a man who thought he could talk his way out of anything. He told the other inmates he was a developer. He told them he was just there on a misunderstanding. He thought his suit and his smooth talk would buy him protection. He was wrong. In prison, respect is not bought with words. It is earned with blood. And Blake had never bled for anything in his life. The collection agents came for him in the shower block on a Tuesday morning. There were 3 of them. They did not use shanks, they used their fists and their boots. They wanted to send a message, not just to Blake, but to everyone who thought they could stiff the organization. They beat him until his ribs cracked like dry twigs. They beat him until the nose Manny had broken was reduced to a pulp of cartilage. They targeted his face specifically. They knew that Blake's vanity was his armor. They stripped it away layer by layer until the man looking back from the polished steel mirror in his cell was a stranger. He lost a tooth, then another. His left eye was permanently swollen shut. The handsome, charming real estate agent who had seduced my daughter and charmed my board of directors was gone. In his place was a jagged, scarred ruin of a man who jumped at his own shadow. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating because every time he went to the cafeteria, someone would spit in his tray or whisper a threat in his ear. He was living in a state of constant terror. He had traded the fear of being caught for the fear of being hunted. He tried to buy friends with promises of money he did not have. He promised them cuts of the insurance payout that was never coming. He promised them jobs at Stone Logistics. But in prison, a liar is the lowest form of life. When the other inmates realized he was a fraud, the abuse got worse. They stole his shoes. They stole his blanket. They made him sleep on the cold concrete floor. He was stripped of his dignity, his comfort, and his identity. He was no longer Blake Anderson, the rising star. He was just inmate number 749, a number with a debt that could never be paid. I imagined him lying in his bunk at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the screams and the slamming of iron doors. I wondered if he thought about the brake line. I wondered if he thought about the poison. I wondered if he realized that every blow he took, every night he spent shivering in the cold, was a direct result of his own greed. He had built his own hell brick by brick, and now he had to live in it. The invitation came in the form of a request from his public defender. Blake wanted to see me. He claimed he had information about the company. He claimed he wanted to make amends. I knew it was a lie. He wanted money. He wanted protection. He wanted me to use my influence to get him moved to protective custody. I could have refused. I could have let him rot without ever seeing his face again. But I needed closure. I needed to look him in the eye one last time and make sure he understood that there was no hope coming. I needed to be the one to close the book. I dressed carefully for the visit. I wore my best navy suit, the one with the pinstripes. I wore a crisp white shirt and a silk tie. I polished my shoes until they shone like mirrors. I grabbed my cane, not because I needed it, but because it was a symbol of the authority I had reclaimed. I wanted him to see Victor Stone, the CEO, Victor Stone, the patriarch, Victor Stone, the man he could not kill. The drive to the prison was silent. Manny drove. He didn't say a word, but he glanced at me in the rearview mirror every now and then. He saw the grim determination on my face. We pulled up to the gates. The razor wire glinted in the sun. It looked sharp. It looked final. I walked through the security checkpoints, the metal detectors, the pat-downs, the heavy buzzing of electric locks. The air inside smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. It was the smell of misery. I was led to a small room divided by a thick pane of bulletproof glass. On one side was a plastic chair for me. On the other side was a metal stool bolted to the floor. I sat down and waited. 5 minutes later, the door on the other side opened. A guard led Blake in. I barely recognized him. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 30 pounds. His skin was sallow and gray, deprived of sunlight. His hair, which he used to style so meticulously, was shaved close to his skull, revealing a jagged scar above his ear. But it was his face that stopped me cold. It was a roadmap of violence. His nose was flattened, his lip was split and healing badly. His left eye was a milky ruin. He shuffled to the stool, dragging his feet. He sat down and looked at me. His good eye was filled with a desperate, frantic hope that turned my stomach. He picked up the black phone on the wall. I picked up mine. "Vic," he rasped. His voice was different. The smooth baritone was gone, replaced by a wet, gravelly whisper. "Thank you for coming. Thank you. I knew you would come. I did not say you are welcome. I just looked at him." "You look terrible, Blake," I said. My voice was calm, detached, like I was commenting on the weather. "It is hell in here," Vic Blake said, leaning close to the glass. His breath fogged the surface. "You have to get me out. You have to help me. They are killing me. The Chicago guys. They have people inside. They beat me every day. They say if I don't pay, they are going to shank me." "That sounds painful," I said. "Vic, please listen." Blake pleaded, tears welling up in his good eye. "I can't stay in general population. You know people. You have connections. Make a call. Get me moved to protective custody, or pay them. Please, Vic. It is $2 million. That is nothing to you. Just pay them off and they will leave me alone. I will sign anything. I will sign the divorce papers. I will give up all rights to everything. Just save my life." I watched him beg. I watched the man who had pointed a gun at my daughter's head reduced to a weeping child. It was pathetic, and it was just. "I am not going to do that, Blake," I said. Blake froze. The hope in his eye flickered and died. "What do you mean?" he whispered. "I mean, I am not going to help you," I said, slowly enunciating every word. "I am not going to call the warden. I am not going to call your creditors. And I am certainly not going to pay your debt." "But they will kill me," Blake shrieked. He slammed his fist against the glass. The guard behind him took a step forward, reaching for his baton. I leaned in closer to the glass. My face was inches from his, separated only by the barrier he could not break. "You tried to kill me, Blake," I said. "You tried to kill my daughter. You burned my home. You betrayed every trust I ever placed in you. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it, even if it is full of thorns." Blake began to sob, great heaving sobs that racked his thin body. "I am sorry, Vic. I am so sorry. I was desperate. I was sick. You were greedy," I corrected him. "And you were cruel. You called my daughter useless. You called me a senile old bat. Do you remember that?" "I do. I remember every word." "Vic, please," Blake moaned. "Just a little money. For the commissary. For protection. I have nothing. I am starving." I reached into my pocket. Blake's eye lit up. He thought I was reaching for my checkbook. I pulled out a photo. It was a picture of Kendra standing in front of the new office building we were constructing. She looked happy. She looked strong. She was smiling. I held it up to the glass. "She is doing well," I said. "She is running HR now. She is dating a nice man. A teacher. He treats her like a queen. She doesn't ask about you. She doesn't think about you. You are a ghost to her, Blake. A bad dream that she woke up from." Blake stared at the photo. The pain on his face was real now. It wasn't physical pain. It was the pain of total loss. I put the photo away. "I came here to tell you one thing, Blake," I said. "I wanted you to hear it from me." What Blake whispered. "You are going to be in here for 20 years, I said. "And every single day, you are going to wake up and remember that you had it all. You had a wife who loved you. You had a father-in-law who respected you. You had a future. And you threw it all away because you wanted a shortcut." I stood up. I adjusted my jacket. "I hope the time passes slowly," I said. I hung up the phone. "Vic, wait!" Blake screamed. He slammed the receiver against the glass. "Don't leave me. Vic. Dad, please." I turned my back on him. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I could hear him screaming behind me, muffled by the glass. He was screaming my name. He was screaming for mercy. I signaled the guard to open the door. I walked out into the hallway. The screams faded as the door closed with a heavy metallic clang. I walked back through the checkpoints. I walked out into the sunshine. Manny was waiting by the car. He opened the door for me. "Everything okay, boss?" Manny asked. I looked back at the gray concrete walls of the prison. I thought about the man inside, trapped in the cage of his own making. "Everything is fine, Manny," I said. "Let's go home." We drove away, leaving the prison behind. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. Only the past. And I had a future to build. It took us a year to rebuild on the ashes of the old estate, but I did not mind the wait because this time we were building something different. The old house had been a monument to my ego, a sprawling colonial mansion designed to impress people I did not like. The new house is different. It is modern with glass walls that let the light flood in from every angle. There are no dark corners for secrets to hide in and no heavy velvet curtains to conceal dead plants or dying relationships. I stood on the deck overlooking the valley, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. The smell of smoke was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh cedar and wet earth. I took a sip of my black coffee and felt a peace I had not known in a decade. Manny was down in the driveway polishing the chrome on my new truck. We had officially retired the Ford F-150, keeping the cut brake line mounted in a shadow box in the garage as a reminder of how close we came to the edge. Manny looked up and waved. He was not just my mechanic anymore, he was my brother in every way that mattered. He had his own room in the new house and a seat at the dinner table every night. We had forged a bond in the fire that was stronger than steel. Kendra walked out onto the deck, joining me. She was dressed for work, wearing a sharp charcoal suit that looked like armor. She held a tablet in one hand and a green smoothie in the other. She kissed my cheek. "Good morning, Dad," she said. Her voice was clear and resonant. The tremble that used to define her speech was gone, buried under layers of newfound confidence. I looked at her. The bruise on her cheek had healed months ago, leaving no scar, but the internal healing had been even more profound. She looked at the driveway. The landscapers were planting new rhododendrons, the same bushes that had hidden us on that terrible night. "It feels good, doesn't it?" she asked, looking at the new construction. "It feels clean," I replied. "We burned the rot out, Kendra. We burned it all out." She nodded, taking a sip of her drink. "I have the quarterly reports for the board meeting today," she said, shifting seamlessly into business mode. "Revenue is up 15% since we restructured the dispatch system, and I fired the regional manager in Jersey yesterday." I raised an eyebrow. The old Kendra would have agonized over firing a delivery boy, let alone a manager. "Why?" I asked. "He lied on an expense report," she said simply. "It was a small amount, only $50. But a man who lies about $50 will lie about 50,000. We have a zero-tolerance policy for deception in this family." I smiled. She had learned the lesson well. She had learned that trust is a currency that once spent cannot be counterfeited. We drove to the headquarters of Stone Logistics together. I used to drive because I didn't trust anyone else behind the wheel. But today, I sat in the passenger seat and let Kendra drive. She drove with precision and authority, her hands steady on the wheel. When we walked into the building, the atmosphere had changed. The employees didn't just look down at their desks when we passed. They stood taller. They greeted us with genuine respect. They knew the story. Everyone knew the story. They knew that the Stone family had gone through hell and come out the other side carrying buckets of water. Kendra led the morning meeting. I sat at the back of the conference room, watching her command the room. She didn't shout. She didn't bluster. She spoke with quiet intensity, listening to the drivers and the logistics coordinators, but making the final decisions with a firmness that reminded me of myself 40 years ago. There was a moment during the meeting when a supplier tried to push a rate hike on us, claiming fuel surcharges that didn't exist. The old Kendra would have folded. She would have paid it just to keep the peace. The new Kendra leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table. She looked the supplier in the eye. "Do not mistake my silence for ignorance," she said calmly. "I know the price of diesel in every state we operate in. Your surcharge is padded. You have two choices. You can remove it and we continue our partnership, or you can leave this room and never come back." The room went silent. The supplier stammered, apologized, and removed the charge. I watched her, and I realized something profound. I had spent my life building a company thinking it was my legacy. I was wrong. The trucks, the warehouses, the contracts, they were just things. My true legacy was sitting at the head of that table, My legacy was a woman who refused to be a victim ever again. She was the steel I had forged. That evening we hosted a dinner at the new house. It wasn't a grand party with hundreds of guests like the ones Blake used to insist on. It was intimate. Just Manny and his wife, my lawyer Abernathy, and the new man in Kendra's life, a high school history teacher named David. David was everything Blake was not. He drove a 10-year-old Honda. He wore sweaters that had seen better days. He didn't know anything about bearer bonds or offshore accounts. But when he looked at Kendra, he looked at her face, not her jewelry. He listened when she spoke. He respected her scars. We sat around the fire pit on the deck, watching the stars come out. The laughter was real. The wine was cheap, but it tasted better than the Chateau Margaux Blake had spilled. I sat back listening to the conversation and thought about the journey that brought us here. It was a brutal road. I had almost lost my life. I had almost lost my daughter. I had lost the home I built with my wife. But as I looked at the faces around the fire, I realized that the fire had been a gift. It had stripped away the varnish and revealed the grain. It taught me that blindness is a choice. I had chosen not to see Blake's true nature because I wanted my daughter to be happy. I had chosen to ignore the red flags because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. But life is not a fairy tale. It is a haul. It is a long, hard drive through mountains and valleys, and if you take your eyes off the road for 1 second, you will crash. I stood up and tapped my glass. The conversation died down. Everyone looked at me. I want to propose a toast, I said, my voice thick with emotion. To the mechanics. Everyone looked confused except Manny, who smiled. To the mechanics, I repeated. In life, we spend so much time looking at the shiny paint and the leather seats. We judge people by their polish. But when the brakes fail, when the road gets steep and the gravity of life tries to pull you off the cliff, the paint doesn't matter. The leather doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what is under the hood. The only thing that matters is the mechanics, the loyalty, the courage, the truth. I looked at Manny. You kept my engine running when I wanted to quit. I looked at Kendra. And you rebuilt the transmission when it was shattered. You are the strongest person I know. I looked at David and Abernathy. And to the friends who stand by us not for what we have but for who we are. To the mechanics of our lives, we raised our glasses. To the mechanics, they echoed. As the night wound down and the guests left, I remained by the fire pit watching the embers glow. I thought about Blake one last time. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hate. I felt a distant, cold pity. He was a man who tried to drive a stolen car on a winding road, and he paid the price. He was part of my history now, but he would never be part of my future. I turned to the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the final time. My name is Victor Stone. I am a trucker. I am a father. And I am a survivor. My story is a warning to the wolves who think they can prey on the sheep. You might think we are weak because we are old or because we are kind. You might think you can cut our lines and steal our lives, but remember this. The sheepdog has teeth too, and the mechanic knows how to fix what you break. If you are in a situation where you feel trapped, where someone is making you feel small or useless, look at my daughter. Look at the fire she walked through. You can walk through it too. The wall is only as strong as you let it be. Pick up the hammer, break it down, and if you need help, call a mechanic, call a friend, call the truth. I hope you never have to look under your car and see a cut line. But if you do, I hope you have the courage to get in a different car and drive straight into the fire to save what matters. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories of justice and redemption. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel, and never let anyone else drive your life. This is Victor Stone signing off. The most important lesson I learned is that blind trust is a dangerous luxury. We want to believe that family will always have our back, but sometimes they are the ones holding the knife. True loyalty is not about blood, it is about respect and shared values. I learned that my age was not a weakness. It was my greatest weapon because it gave me the patience to wait and the wisdom to strike when the time was right. You must be willing to burn down the lies to build a foundation of truth, even if it means walking through the fire alone. If you believe that justice was served today, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of redemption and strength.